He left when I was 11. The first job I got was digging holes big enough to bury him in. Mom said he went to find himself. Said it like he just gone to the corner store and got lost between the cereal aisle and the beer cooler. In reality, he ran off with a waitress from the I-75 diner, the one with hair like rusted wire and a laugh that made my skin itch. Last we heard, they were headed west in a '78 Buick LeSabre with mismatched doors and a cracked windshield that whistled in the rain. He left behind his toolbox, 3 pairs of dirty boots, and a fridge full of cheap beer. And me. I dropped out of school at 16. Not because I was stupid, I read more than most kids I knew, but because the bills didn't pay themselves and Mom had started falling asleep in front of the TV with the oven still on. Greenwood Cemetery was the only place that didn't ask too many questions. You showed up sober, you worked until your shirt was soaked through, and you went home with enough cash to keep the lights on. The first time I dug a grave, I puked behind a row of dogwoods. Something about the mix of sweat, diesel, and freshly turned earth hit wrong in the back of my throat. Walt, the groundskeeper, didn't say a word. Just handed me a flask of something sharp and said, "Sip, don't swig. You'll get used to it." Walt was 73, a Korean war vet with a back shaped like a question mark and hands like tree bark. He'd been working the cemetery since before I was born. Never talked much unless he was angry or drunk, and sometimes both. But he taught me everything. How to measure out a plot with nothing but 2 sticks and a string. How to tell when a coffin was coming in too light. How to listen to people cry without turning it into a performance. "Grief ain't a parade," he'd say. "It's a goddamn whisper. So shut your mouth and listen." That first year, I learned more than I ever did in school. Things like, wear thick socks in winter or your toes will rot. Don't whistle in the graveyard, even if you don't believe in ghosts. Always carry extra gloves. And if a man breaks down at his wife's funeral, don't pat his shoulder. Let him break. There was one funeral I remember clear, February, cold enough that the dirt came up in bricks. The woman was young, barely 30. "Cancer," someone whispered. Her husband stood there, holding a toddler in a puffy pink coat, her mittens tied to her sleeves like wings. He never cried. Just stared at the casket like he was trying to solve a riddle no one had the answer to. After they left, I stayed behind. Cleaned up the folding chairs, packed up the green fake grass that's supposed to hide the dirt like grief's something you can cover up. Walt leaned on his shovel and looked at me like he was seeing through me. "You ever wonder if he blames the kid?" It hit me like a shovel to the chest. Because I had wondered that. About me. If maybe I'd made it too hard for Dad to stay. Too loud, too needy, too much like the mirror he didn't want to look into. But Walt didn't ask to pry. Just to say it out loud, so it didn't eat me alive from the inside. Walt smoked filterless Pall Malls and smelled like turpentine and black coffee. He never married. Said war cured him of romance. But he had a way of making you feel like you weren't just a set of hands swinging a pickaxe. He knew when to talk and when to keep his mouth shut. That, I learned, was the rarest kind of wisdom. There was a rhythm to it. Death comes in waves. You get busy around holidays, oddly enough. Something about people holding on until New Year's or letting go after Thanksgiving. Spring, too. Walt said it's the thaw that does it, gets into the bones. Sometimes families come by to visit. The old-timers mostly, stooped and quiet, leaving flowers that freeze to the granite. I used to make up stories about the names on the stones. John H. Carter, 1924 to 1995. Maybe he was a jazz musician. Maybe he cheated on his taxes. Maybe he told his daughter every night that she was the best thing that ever happened to him. Maybe she never believed it. That's the thing about graves. They don't tell you what kind of man someone was. Just when they started and when they stopped. 2 years into the job, I could dig a grave in under 4 hours. Clean, no cave-ins. I could lower a coffin without a sound and say, "I'm sorry for your loss," without flinching. I stopped puking. I stopped wondering when Dad would call. Stopped thinking about what I'd say if he did. Then, One Monday morning in late August, Walt handed me a slip of paper. A death notice. He didn't say a word. Just nodded toward the name on it. Daniel Joseph Foster Sr. I read it 3 times before it sank in. My hands went cold. My mouth felt full of dirt. He died in defiance, Walt said. Heart failure. I stared at the name. My name minus the junior. He's coming here? Walt nodded. Friday. I didn't ask who arranged it. Didn't care. The man left when I still had baby teeth. Now I was supposed to bury him like it was just another job. Walt lit a cigarette and looked out over the graves. You don't have to do it. But I did. I needed to. Because I had things to say. Not out loud, God, no, but with my hands, with the way I dug that earth, with the way I folded the sod back like it mattered. The son he left behind was the one putting him in the ground. And that had to mean something. Walt told me to take the day off. Said he'd cover for me, that maybe it wasn't a good idea to be the one holding the shovel when your old man goes into the dirt. But I showed up anyway. I showed up early. The sun hadn't cleared the trees yet, and everything was wet with that August dew that clings to your boots like the earth doesn't want to let go. I opened the shed, took out the spade, and walked to plot 94 without looking back. The grass was long there, waiting for something. Me, maybe. I took my time. Measured twice. Cut clean. There's a way to slice the ground so it opens like it's supposed to. It's a respect thing, Walt said. You don't hack at it. You ask it to open. That morning, I wasn't just asking. I was digging for every moment he missed, every game, every fever, every night I asked Mom when he was coming home. I didn't say a word. Just worked. Let my shoulders do the talking. By 10, the hole was done. 6 feet down, square, clean edges. I sat at the edge with a thermos of lukewarm coffee and waited. Didn't know what I was waiting for. Closure? Forgiveness? A sign? None of that showed up. What did show up was the hearse. It rolled in slow, like it was trying not to wake the dead. I didn't recognize the driver. Didn't recognize the woman who got out after him, either. She was maybe 30, maybe older. Wore a black dress that clung to her like mourning was something she wore well. Her eyes landed on me and stayed there. You Danny? Yeah. She nodded. I'm Claire. Your sister. I laughed. Couldn't help it. A hard, dry sound. Didn't know he had another kid. Neither did I, she said. Turns out, after he left us, he started over. New town. New job. New family. Same man underneath, though. Ran when Claire was 10. Only difference was, she got to know him for a little while longer. Just long enough to miss him. Just long enough to hate him different. The service was small. Just her, some guy I figured was a boyfriend, and a priest who mispronounced our last name. No one cried. No one spoke. When they asked if I wanted to say anything, I shook my head. What was there to say? He was here, then he wasn't. He was a shadow. A name I inherited and carried like a wound. Now he was ash and muscle and old regrets, boxed up in polished wood. We lowered him slow. Claire touched the casket once. I didn't. After they left, I stayed. Walt came up behind me, quiet like always. Handed me a beer. Warm, but I drank it anyway. You did right, he said. Did I? He nodded. You put him in the ground. With care. That's more than he gave you. I didn't answer. Just watched the sun fall through the trees like God was closing a curtain. Later that week, Claire called. Said she found a box of letters he'd written but never sent. One had my name on it. I met her at a diner off I-90. She slid the envelope across the table like it might bite. I held it for a long time. Didn't open it. Just stared at my name in handwriting I barely remembered. He wrote like a man trying to convince himself of something. Finally, I opened it. Inside were 4 pages. Rambling, half-drunk thoughts about guilt and time and how he thought he was doing the right thing, leaving. Said he didn't want to be a burden. Said he thought we'd be better off. I read it twice. Then I folded it up, put it in my jacket, and never read it again. Some wounds don't close. You just learn to stop picking at them. Back at the cemetery, life went on. Graves got dug. Rain came. Grass grew. One afternoon, Walt didn't show up. I called. No answer. Drove by his place. Found him on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, cigarette burned down to the filter. He looked smaller somehow. Like the weight of his years finally caught up. Doc says my ticker's bad, he said. Wants me to quit. I didn't ask if he meant the smokes or the job. We both knew it was both. That winter, I started running the place on my own. Ordered supplies. Talked to the families. Dug the holes. Sometimes I'd talk to the dead. Tell them about the Browns game. About how Claire and I met up every few months now. About how Mom was still alive, still watching soap operas like they held the meaning of life. I told them about the man I buried. My father. How he left 2 kids with the same jawline and the same haunted look. How I didn't forgive him. But I buried him anyway. Because somebody had to. Walt hung on longer than I thought he would. He kept showing up now and then, bundled in layers, shuffling slow, like every step cost him something. He didn't dig anymore, just supervised from a folding chair under the old pine tree. He'd bark corrections now and then, always with a cigarette trembling in his fingers. I think he just didn't want to die at home. The dead don't need me, he said once. But the dirt does. I didn't know what he meant until much later. By spring, I'd learned to fill silence with purpose. When grief walked in, I knew not to rush it. I kept Kleenex in my back pocket, and a poker face better than any funeral director in town. Greenwood became something like sacred ground to me, not holy, not divine, just honest. I started noticing things. Like how people stand when they're saying goodbye, how some face the grave head on, and some turn sideways, like they can't look lost in the eye. I kept a mental list of the ones who came back after the funeral, weeks later, to just sit and talk to a stone. Those were the ones who carried the weight deep. Claire came by sometimes. Always with black coffee and some story about our dad that made me question what I thought I knew. Apparently, he used to write poetry. Terrible stuff, full of rhymes like love and dove. But still, the image of him scribbling on napkins in a truck stop booth made him feel more human, and less like a ghost who happened to donate DNA. One day she brought a photo, him holding her as a baby, looking like he hadn't yet learned how to be absent. I stared at it for a long time. His hands looked steady. His eyes almost kind. He could be sweet, Claire said, setting the cup down. When he wanted to be. I didn't know what to do with that. My memory of him was all slammed doors and cigarette smoke. But her version, softer, sadder, started to crowd in. That night, I found the letter again. Pulled it from the inside pocket of my winter coat. The paper was still folded into 4 soft creases, ink faded at the edges. I didn't read it. Just held it. The next morning, Walt was gone. His chair was still under the pine. A butt still smoldering in the tray beside it. But he wasn't there. I found out later he passed in his sleep. No fuss. Just went out like a light bulb finally giving in to the dark. The cemetery felt different after that. Quieter somehow. Like it was holding its breath. I dug Walt's grave myself. Wouldn't let anyone else touch it. Took me twice as long, not because it was harder, but because I kept stopping. Remembering things. The first time he showed me how to oil a chain. The time he yelled at me for laughing during a service, not knowing the man in the box was his cousin. The day he let me call him something like a father, and didn't flinch. He didn't have much family. A niece in Akron sent flowers. No one spoke at the service. So I did. I stood there in boots caked in mud, dirt under my nails, and I told the dozen empty chairs that Walt taught me everything my father didn't. How to show up. How to shut up. How to keep your word. And then I said thank you? When I filled the grave in, I took my time. Pressed the earth smooth. Folded the sod like he'd taught me. Made it look like no one had ever been there. That was the last grave I dug by hand. After Walt, things changed. The city brought in machines, part of some cost-efficiency initiative. The new guy, Travis, was fresh out of community college and wore sunglasses even on cloudy days. He called it a gig, like we were playing bass at a bar. He didn't last long. People still died. Plots still got filled. But something about the rhythm was off without Walt. I started thinking about leaving. About maybe going back to school. About what it meant to stay rooted in a place filled with endings. Then one morning, a kid showed up. 16, skinny, eyes full of questions he didn't know how to ask. Said his name was Marcus. Said his uncle knew someone who used to work here, Walt. He needed a job. I looked at him. Really looked. Saw myself, all bones and silence, standing outside that same shed 10 years ago. I handed him a shovel. First rule, I said, is you never whistle in a graveyard. Got it? He nodded. Why? Because the dead deserve peace, I said. And because Walt said so. We started digging. Marcus didn't say much for the first few weeks. Just showed up on time, kept his head down, and did what I told him. There was something in his eyes, though, a kind of quiet hunger, the way you look when you're waiting for someone to tell you who you are. One day, I found him sitting by Walt's grave after his shift. Just sitting there, back against the stone, legs stretched out like he was waiting for the old man to start talking. You miss him? He asked as I walked up. Every day. Did he teach you how to do all this? Most of it. Marcus looked down at his boots, scuffed and too big. Feels like maybe I came too late. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked out over the cemetery, the way the rose caught the last bit of sun like teeth in a crooked grin. Walt believed the dead could teach us more than the living, if we knew how to listen, I said. So maybe you're not too late. Maybe you're right on time. He nodded, like he didn't believe me but wanted to. I started showing him the small things. How to cut a grave clean. How to brace the walls if the ground was wet. How to keep your shoulders square when the casket comes down, no matter how heavy the grief hanging off it. He learned fast. The way I did. Not because he had a knack for it, but because he needed it. Work like that. It makes room inside you, clears space that grief or rage or whatever you can't name used to fill. One night after a long day, we sat on the tailgate of the truck, sharing a sandwich and a bottle of Coke. The air smelled like lilacs and gasoline. You think your dad would have liked this place? Marcus asked. I didn't answer right away. Took a long sip, stared out at the headstones. No, I said. But I think he would have respected it. Eventually. Marcus chewed that over like he wasn't sure if it was a good thing or not. You ever talk to him? Like at his grave? Sometimes. When the day's quiet enough. What do you say? Depends, I said. Sometimes I tell him about Mom. Sometimes I tell him I hope he's found whatever he was looking for. Sometimes I just sit and say nothing. There was a long silence after that. Then Marcus asked, Do you think it matters? What we say? I thought of Walt, sitting under the pine. Of Claire, lighting candles on Dad's birthday. Of the man with the toddler in the pink coat. Of all the people who showed up, year after year, just to stand and remember. Yeah, I said. I think it does. That summer was hot. Too many burials, not enough rain. The ground cracked in places, like the earth was grieving too. I taught Marcus how to pace himself, how to lift with his legs, how to read the air for storms. He never complained, even when the blisters came. One morning, we buried a boy his age. Car crash. Whole town showed up. Football jersey draped over the casket like a flag. After everyone left, Marcus didn't move. Just stood at the grave, shovel still in his hands. I didn't know him, he said. But it feels like I lost something. You did, I said. That's the trick of it. When someone dies, they take something from all of us. He looked at me, eyes glassy. How do you carry it? Same way you dig, I said. 1 foot at a time. That night, I dreamed of Walt. He was younger in the dream, back straight, hands clean. He didn't say anything. Just tipped his hat and turned back to the shed, like he'd been waiting for me to catch up. I woke up with the feeling that I'd missed something. Like maybe the real lesson wasn't in the digging. Maybe it was in the staying. That weekend, Claire brought me a folder. Said she found it in a storage unit Dad had rented. It was full of old receipts, photographs, some court paperwork. And at the very bottom, a birthday card addressed to me. Never opened. Never sent. Inside was $10, and a note that said, "For your first set of tools. I'll make it up to you next year. Love, Dad." I stared at it a long time. Then I gave the 10 to Marcus. "Get yourself a better pair of gloves," I said. He looked confused. "What for?" "For the next grave," I said. "Because they always came. And someone always had to dig." Marcus kept the gloves, but he never used the $10. Said he'd hold on to it like it meant something. Like it connected him to a story he wasn't born into, but still somehow belonged to. "Feels like blood money," he joked once. "Or ghost money." He was getting good. Could dig clean and quick, read a funeral crowd like a weather vane. He started showing up early, staying late. Some days I'd find him sitting under Walt's tree, sketching grave markers. Said he liked the shapes, the way the lines softened with time. "Most people think granite's forever," he said. "But even stone gets tired." That fall, the cemetery flooded. A pipe burst under the west end, turned the whole area into soup. Graves caved in. Grass peeled back like scalp. I had to call families. Explain. Offer apologies that felt thinner than the envelopes I mailed them in. Marcus helped me fix it. We worked by lantern light some nights, hauling sandbags, resetting headstones. He didn't complain once. One night, knee-deep in mud, I looked at him and said, "You ever think about doing something else?" He looked around like he needed help understanding the question. "Like what?" I didn't know. Still don't. The only life I'd ever known was between rows of stone and sod. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder what it'd be like to build something instead of bury it. "I dunno," I said. "Just wondered if this was enough for you." Marcus looked back at the grave we just fixed. It was clean now, polished, name readable again. "I think it's more than enough," he said. "This place, it matters." He was right. It did. It still does. One weekend, Claire brought her daughter to visit. Little thing, maybe 6, named Nora. She wandered through the rows like they were a forest, made just for her. Asked about every name, every statue. "Why are there angels?" she asked. "Some people think they help guide the dead," I said. "Where to?" I knelt down beside her. "Wherever they need to go." She pointed to one stone, all moss and chipped marble. "Who was this?" "Don't know. Been gone a long time." She looked up at me. "Do you think someone still loves them?" God, that question. I didn't answer. Not right away. Just stood there as the wind picked up and the smell of wet leaves settled over everything. "I hope so," I finally said. "Because love, even buried under time and silence, has roots." After they left, I stood alone in the middle of Greenwood and thought about my dad again. Thought about Claire. Thought about the card, the $10, the tools I never got. I realized then I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't forgive him either. But hate had burned out. Left something quieter in its place. Understanding, maybe? Or just exhaustion. The dead don't owe us answers. And sometimes, the living don't either. Winter came fast that year. The kind that freezes your breath to your collarbone. We wrapped coffins in thermal blankets, dug slow, tried not to snap the shovels in the frost. Marcus learned how to keep a thermos full of soup. Learned how to find stillness in the cold. One day, he found a bird frozen mid-flight, wings spread, body stiff on the ground. He buried it behind the tool shed without saying a word. "What should we write on the marker?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just remember where you put it." That was the thing about this work. It wasn't about the names or dates. It was about the weight you carried and the quiet you left behind. Spring came late. The kind that makes you wonder if the trees forgot how to bloom. But they did. Eventually. And so did I. The thaw brought more than crocuses and mud. It brought a letter. Mailed to the cemetery, addressed to me. Handwritten, blocky script, no return address. Inside was a photo, grainy, sun-bleached, of my father leaning against the Buick, arms slung around the waitress. They were in the desert somewhere. I could tell by the dust and the way the sky looked too big. Taped to the back was a note. "He talked about you more than he let on. Thought you'd want this." No name. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I missed him, by then I didn't, but because it was proof that he'd existed in more than just the echo of an engine pulling away. I didn't tell Claire. Didn't know how. We'd come to a kind of peace, her and me. Shared memories from opposite shores, building a bridge between them plank by shaky plank. I didn't want to shake it. Instead, I put the photo in a tin box and buried it near the bird Marcus had laid to rest. No marker. Just a notch in the fence post to remind me. That spring was busy. Lots of old deaths and a few young ones. The kind that sat heavy in your chest for days after. One was a boy named Aaron, 15, overdose. His mother came back every morning at sunrise for weeks. Just stood there, lips moving like a hymn. Marcus wanted to talk to her. I told him no. "Sometimes silence is the kindest thing," I said. He didn't agree, not at first. But he watched. Learned. Like I had. Claire called in May. Said Mom had a fall. Nothing broken, but she was slower now, foggier. Wanted to know if I'd come by more. I started visiting Sundays. Brought soup. Sat through commercials and stories she only half remembered. Sometimes she mistook me for him. Said things like, "Why'd you go, Joe?" I let her. Let the past bleed through. Gave her the ending she never got. Once, while washing dishes, she said, "You turned out better than I expected." It was the kindest thing she'd ever said to me. Back at the cemetery, we lost another big oak to lightning. Split clean down the middle, right through plot 57. The coffin wasn't damaged, but it felt like a sign. Like the roots couldn't hold everything anymore. Marcus and I cleared it, limb by limb. He carved a piece into a cross and nailed it to the shed. "Walt would have liked that," I said. He smiled. "I know." The days got longer. Birds louder. We stopped needing thermal blankets. The ground softened, and the dig came easier. I told Marcus he could handle the next burial alone. He looked terrified. "You'll be fine," I said. "Just listen." "To what?" "To everything they don't say." He did it. Clean and proper. Said the words. Lowered the box. Smoothed the sod. After, he sat beside me on the grass, both of us sweating through our shirts. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. "Every day," I said. "But you stay." "Yeah. I stay." "Why?" I didn't answer right away. Just looked out at the rows, all that quiet history, all those unfinished conversations. Because someone has to. Summer came with the kind of heat that made your skin feel borrowed. We kept digging. Kept sweating. Kept showing up. By then, the cemetery didn't just feel like my workplace. It felt like a story I was still inside of, a long one, told in quiet chapters, where the plot never moved fast, but every word counted. Marcus asked one morning if we were ever going to plant flowers. "What for?" I asked. "Color. Life. Something besides stone and grass." I shrugged, but the next day he brought marigold seeds and planted them in a corner near the infant plots. Said they were for the ones who never got a birthday. That kid had more heart than he let on. We got a new regular that month, Mrs. Kowalski, widow, sharp as a tack, cane that clicked like a metronome on the gravel. She'd visit her husband's grave every Thursday and bring a thermos of tea. Sometimes she talked to Marcus. Said he reminded her of her grandson. "You're too kind for this work," she told him. "It'll wear you down." Marcus just smiled. "I think it builds something, too." I started to believe that. That maybe all the holes we dug weren't just about endings. Maybe they were invitations. Spaces to put the things we couldn't carry anymore. One day I found Marcus sitting at plot 94, my father's. He didn't know I was behind him. "Must have been a tough guy," he said quietly. "Tough enough to leave," I said. He turned, startled. "Sorry, I wasn't." "It's all right." I joined him. The grass had come back full. The stone was plain. Just a name, 2 dates, and nothing in between. "I never really hated him," I said. "I just didn't get a chance to know who I was without him first." Marcus nodded. "You think he'd be proud of you?" "I don't know. Maybe. Depends on what he thought mattered." We sat in silence for a while. "Do you believe in anything?" he asked. "Like after all this? Afterlife?" "Yeah. Or something." I thought about it. About Walt. About the boy with the pink mittens. About the bird. About the photo buried in the tin box. "I believe in the way grass grows back," I said. "In the way people still come, even years later, just to sit. I believe in the quiet. In the way we remember." Marcus nodded, eyes fixed on the sky. "Yeah. That feels like enough." That week, we held a double burial. Husband and wife, passed within 2 days of each other. Been married 61 years. Their daughter told us they'd held hands even at the end. Marcus said, "Maybe that's what we're all looking for." "Maybe," I said. But deep down, I wasn't sure. I think some of us are just looking for a place to be still. Somewhere to put the ache. After we filled the grave, I looked at Marcus. "You're good at this," I said. "Thanks. You ever think about taking over?" He paused. "You leaving?" "Not yet. But someday." He looked around, hands on his hips, the sun baking dust into our collars. "Yeah," he said. "I think I could do that." We packed up in silence. Another chapter closed. Another space filled. The marigolds were blooming now. Bright and orange and loud against all that gray. And I thought, maybe the job wasn't to dig graves. Maybe it was to make sure what was buried never got forgotten. There's a certain kind of quiet that only comes in autumn. Not silence exactly, leaves still rustle, birds still argue, but a kind of hush, like the whole world's catching its breath. That's how it felt walking into Greenwood that October. The air was crisp, edged with smoke from burning leaves and the bite of coming frost. The marigolds were wilting, curling in on themselves like they knew something we didn't. Marcus had started bringing a journal to work. Said he was trying to write things down, memories, thoughts, things he'd heard while eavesdropping on grief. I didn't pry. Some things grow better when left alone. One Saturday, he handed me a page. No title. Just this. There's a difference between being buried and being forgotten. Dirt covers both, but memory is the shovel that digs us back up. I didn't say anything. Just folded it up and tucked it into my wallet, behind the photo Claire had given me years ago, the one of Dad smiling like he hadn't figured out how to ruin things yet. People came and went, as always. We buried a schoolteacher, a Vietnam vet, a woman who used to bake pies for the firehouse. Each one got a square of land, a marker, and a handful of people left behind trying to figure out how to move forward without tripping over what they'd lost. One day, Claire showed up with a box. "Mom passed," she said. It was sudden, in her sleep. Peaceful. No pain. Just absence. She looked tired, like she'd cried all she could. I didn't say much. Just put my arm around her and walked her to the office. She handed me the paperwork. Cremation. No service. She said she didn't want anyone fussing. Claire said. Just somewhere simple. I picked a plot near the dogwoods. Not far from Dad. Close enough for a kind of reconciliation, but not so close they'd feel forced to speak. Claire and I stood together as we lowered the urn. She never really let go of him, Claire said. No, I said. She just got better at pretending she had. Afterward, we sat on the hood of my truck, drinking burnt diner coffee from styrofoam cups. Claire pulled her sleeves down over her hands the way she used to when we were kids. You ever regret not leaving? She asked. Sometimes. But I don't think I was supposed to. She nodded. You're part of this place. The way the trees are. The stones. You keep it alive. I didn't say it, but I felt it. That maybe I'd stopped being a boy digging holes to forget a man. Maybe I was something else now. A keeper, maybe? A witness. That night I stayed late. The moon hung low, full and silent. I walked the rows, reading names aloud under my breath. Some I knew by heart. Some I never would. Plot 94 was quiet. Just dew on the stone and a faint crease in the grass from where someone had knelt earlier. Maybe Claire. Maybe Marcus. I knelt too. Mom's here now, I said. She's close. Maybe you can try again. The wind picked up, soft and restless. I didn't believe in ghosts. But I did believe in echoes. And in that moment I swore I heard a voice say, "Thank you." I stayed until the chill cut through my jacket. Then I walked back to the shed, where Marcus had left the light on. He was waiting, journal in hand, ready to tell me what he'd seen that day. The first snow came early that year. Heavy, wet, the kind that sticks to your eyelashes and makes the world look cleaner than it really is. Greenwood turned into something holy under all that white, like even the dead got a fresh start. Marcus started showing up in the mornings with fresh biscuits and a thermos of hot cider. Said his mom used to bake them on Sundays, back when things were better. He never talked much about her. I never asked. We dug slow that winter. The frost ran deep. Had to jackhammer through the topsoil some days. But the cold made people kinder. More willing to look you in the eye when they said thank you. One afternoon, I found Marcus fixing a crooked headstone. No service that day, just him, a level, and that stubborn look he got when something felt out of place. You know this one? I asked. No. But someone did. He straightened the stone and brushed the snow off the name like it mattered. It did. He was starting to understand the rules that don't get written down. That night, I dreamed of my father again. Only this time, we were sitting on the hood of the Buick, watching the stars through a cracked windshield. He handed me a socket wrench and said, "It ain't about fixing things, Danny. It's about showing up with the tools anyway." I woke up before I could ask him what he meant. In early January, I got a letter from the city. They wanted to expand the cemetery. Buy up the vacant lots east of Greenwood. Said the growth was good. Said it meant progress. But all I could think about were the roots. The ones Walt told me not to disturb. The ones that held this place together. I told Marcus. "You think they'll do it?" he asked. "Eventually. They always do." We stood at the fence, looking out at the empty fields, the silence. "If they build there," he said, "we'll bury people who never walked these grounds. People who never felt this quiet." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they'll just bring more stories." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't like it. That week, I started writing again. Nothing fancy. Just notes, dates, names. Moments I didn't want to forget. Like the sound of Mrs. Kowalski's cane on the path. Or the way Claire cried without making a sound. Or the day Marcus planted the marigolds. I didn't know what I was writing it for. Just that it felt like something I owed. To Walt. To myself. To the man who left, and the boy who stayed. That Saturday, Marcus and I stayed late. The sky turned orange, then indigo, then black. We lit a fire in the old drum barrel behind the shed and passed a bottle between us. "I think I'm gonna stay," he said, voice quiet. "Good. I don't know if I believe in anything yet. Not really. You don't have to. But I believe in you. And this place. That's something. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded. Passed him the bottle. The fire cracked and hissed. Snowflakes drifted through the smoke. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was digging my way out of something. I felt like I was finally standing still. The cemetery was quiet the day I decided to leave. Not forever. Just long enough to find out who I'd be without a shovel in my hands. I told Marcus over lunch, sitting on the tailgate, peanut butter sandwiches and the hum of cicadas filling in the words I couldn't quite say. I'll keep it going, he said, like he already knew. Walt would have wanted that. No, I said. Walt would have wanted you to do it your way. He smiled. Same thing, isn't it? We walked the grounds that evening. The marigolds were gone now, but he promised to plant more come spring. Said he'd name them after the stories we didn't get to finish. I left him my key to the shed, my work gloves, and a copy of the binder I'd been keeping. Names, layouts, things that only lived in my head until I wrote them down. On the last page I wrote, dig deep. Love deeper. Don't forget to rest. Before I left, I visited the graves one more time. Walt's first. Thanks for the work, I said. And the silence. Then Mom's. You held it together longer than I ever gave you credit for. Then Dad's. I learned more from your absence than I think I would have from your presence. But I wish it had been different. Finally, I walked out to the corner, where I'd buried the photo in the tin box. I didn't dig it up. Just stood there. Let the breeze tell me whatever it needed to. Marcus came to see me off the next morning. You sure you don't want me to drive you? I shook my head. This part I gotta do alone. He handed me a small notebook. What's this? Something I've been keeping. Thoughts. Quotes. Bits of you that got into me. I tucked it in my coat pocket. I'll bring back something worth writing about. You already have. I left Greenwood in a rusted pickup that coughed like an old man and smelled like memory. I didn't have a plan. Just a direction. South. Maybe east. Somewhere I could walk streets where no one knew me as the grave digger, the quiet one, the son of a ghost. The world outside the cemetery felt louder. Faster. But I wasn't afraid of the noise. I learned to carry silence like armor. Every town I passed, I watched the people. Wondered who they'd lost. Wondered who buried them. Sometimes I'd pull over, write things down. A name on a diner receipt. A sentence overheard in a gas station. I kept Marcus's notebook close. Started filling in the blank pages. Weeks passed. Then months. One morning, I found myself in a town that looked like the others. Weathered storefronts, stray cats, church bells. But something in me said, here. Just for a while. I found work at a lumberyard. Quiet, steady. I wrote at night. Walked at dawn. And I missed the graves. Not the death. The care. The weight of remembering. I wrote Marcus a letter. Told him I was okay. That I'd seen 3 churches, 2 baptisms, and 1 wedding where the groom cried like a child. He wrote back. The marigolds are coming in early this year. I named the patch after Walt. I hope that's all right. It was. In time, I'll go back. Not to stay. But to stand among what I helped build. To see if the grass still grows clean, if the stones still stand straight. To watch Marcus teach some kid how to hold a shovel and keep his mouth shut when it matters. And when I do, I'll kneel beside my father's grave, press my hand to the earth, and say, I dug this for you. And I filled it with everything I was. Then I'll rise, turn toward the gate, and walk on. Because I've learned how to leave now. And how to stay, too. The box came in the mail. No warning. No note. Just a plain, beaten-up cardboard box sitting on my doorstep one Tuesday morning like it had walked there on its own. The return address was handwritten. Faded. Massachusetts. I knew immediately what it was, and who it came from, even before I picked it up. My father was dead. And this was what he left me. Not a house. Not money. Not some long-lost key to a safety deposit box or a letter explaining everything. Just a shoebox. Literally. Inside was a pair of old leather boots, cracked at the heels, laces stiff with time. Beneath them, a bundle of photographs, rubber-banded together. A small black journal with a single elastic strap holding it shut. And one envelope with my name scrawled across the front in shaky handwriting that looked like it had been done by someone whose hands were no longer steady. That was it. No will. No explanation. Just the weight of someone else's life delivered to my front porch. I brought it inside and put it on the kitchen table. Just looked at it for a long time. Poured a cup of coffee I didn't drink. Let the morning light move across the floor while the box just sat there. It felt wrong to touch it. Like opening it would be crossing some line I wasn't sure I was ready for. I hadn't seen my father in 16 years. And even when he was around, I couldn't say I ever really knew him. He was a shadow in the corner of every room. A figure who always seemed like he was about to leave, even when he was standing still. Some men grow into their role as a father. Others wear it like a coat that never quite fits. He wore it like a loan he never meant to keep. I opened the envelope first. Inside, a single sheet of lined notebook paper. James, if you're reading this, I guess it's all over. There's a lot I won't get to say out loud. So this will have to do. I don't know what you remember about me, and I don't blame you if it's not much. I left. I know that. I'm not going to give you a list of reasons. I think you'll find them anyway. The journal was supposed to be for me. I ended up writing it for you. Start there. If you want. If not, that's okay too. Either way, I hope you're doing better than I did. Dad. I read it 3 times. Then I set it down and stared at the journal like it might explode. It took me the rest of the day to open it. The boots were the first thing I touched. They were heavy. Worn in a way that said they traveled. The leather was scarred, the soles scuffed smooth. He must have worn them everywhere. Hiking. Working. Running. They smelled like cedar and dust and something I couldn't name, like stories kept in closets too long. I turned them over in my hands and realized, with a small ache in my chest, that we wore the same size. I tried one on. I don't know why. I told myself it was just to see. But the second I slid my foot inside, it felt like something ancient locked into place. Like I'd stepped into a version of myself I didn't know existed. It was terrifying. It was comforting. It was both. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the echo of his letter. The way it ended. I hope you're doing better than I did. I didn't know how he'd done. I didn't know who he became after he left. He wasn't in my life, not even in the background. No phone calls. No birthdays. Just silence. That kind of silence that stretches so long it becomes its own presence. And now I was holding the last fragments of him, trying to feel something that made sense. I opened the photo bundle. They weren't in any kind of order. Just a collection of years tossed together like they'd fallen out of a drawer during an earthquake. There were pictures of landscapes. Mountains. Desert highways. A gas station with a crooked sign. A woman I didn't recognize, smiling, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. And then, there he was. Younger than I remembered him. Beard full. Eyes bright. Smiling with his arms around someone else's child. That was the hardest part. The photos showed a life he built after he left us. And he looked happy. That stung more than I expected. Because for so long, I imagined him as this broken thing. A man who couldn't function. Couldn't stay. Couldn't love. But the man in these photos, he was there. He was present. At least for someone. So why not for me? That question didn't go away. Not when I closed the box. Not when I finally turned out the light. Not even the next morning when I finally opened the journal. The first page was dated March 2009. March 5th. Somewhere near Taos, New Mexico. This morning I saw a kid on the side of the road, playing with a stick like it was a sword. He was wearing a plastic crown, smiling like he had the whole world figured out. Made me think of James. He would have been, what, 11? 12? I don't know. That hurts more than I thought it would, to not know. I stopped reading. Closed the journal. Sat with that sentence like it was a hand around my throat. That hurts more than I thought it would, to not know. Maybe he thought writing that made it better. Maybe it did. But sitting there, in my small apartment with a cup of cold coffee and a dead man's boots on the floor, all I felt was the weight of everything unsaid. And yet, I kept reading. Because I wanted to know who he became. Even if it was too late to know who he was. That's how it started. Not with a memory. Not with a moment of reconciliation. Just a box. A journal. And the smallest crack in the story I told myself for years. That he didn't care. That he never looked back. But maybe he did. And maybe now. Finally, I was ready to follow. My first memory of my father isn't a memory of him at all. It's a photo. Black and white. Curled at the corners. He's holding me in one arm and looking off to the side like someone just said his name. I'm maybe 3. Wearing overalls. Laughing. I don't remember the moment. I only know the photo. And that's how most of my life with him exists, through second-hand stories, blurry images, the way people lower their voice when they talk about him like he's something sacred or shameful. A relic from another life. He left when I was 6. I don't remember the goodbye. If there even was one. I just remember waking up one morning, and his boots weren't by the door anymore. The air felt different. Thinner. Mom said he needed space. Said he wasn't well. Said it wasn't about me. But I was 6. Everything is about you when you're 6. When a plate breaks, you wonder if it was your fault. When a door slams, you ask if you were too loud. And when a father leaves, you learn to measure love by who stays. He didn't come back for birthdays. Didn't call on Christmas. No letters. No packages. Just the photo in a drawer. The empty seat at the dinner table. And a silence that stretched so wide it felt like a second parent. My friends had dads who shouted from the sidelines. Who barbecued on weekends. Who fixed bikes and yelled at traffic and knew how to tie real knots. Mine was a ghost. At school, when we had to draw our families, I always hesitated. Drew my mom first. Then the dog. Then me. Then, just left space. Like something was supposed to go there but never arrived. One year, I drew him anyway. Stick figure. Tall. With a baseball cap. My teacher said, "That's nice. What does your dad do?" I said, "He's away." She nodded like she understood. But she didn't. No one did. The absence wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't make headlines or spark interventions. It was quiet. Like a slow leak in a house you don't know how to fix. Every now and then, someone would ask, "What's your dad like?" And I'd freeze. Because how do you describe a shadow? I'd say, "I don't really know him." And they'd laugh. Think I was joking. Say, "That's just Dad's." But it wasn't. He wasn't there. Not physically. Not emotionally. Not in the ways that matter when you're a child and everything feels too big to hold alone. He didn't teach me how to shave. Didn't show me how to drive. Didn't warn me about girls or money or the way your heart can ache for things it never had. When I scraped my knee, it was Mom who ran. When I won the spelling bee, she was the one clapping loudest in the front row. When I had nightmares, she crawled into bed with me and whispered, "You're safe." And still, there was always that voice in the back of my head asking, "Why didn't he stay?" I used to eavesdrop. Late at night, when Mom was on the phone with her sister or a friend. She'd pour a glass of wine, sit by the window, talk in that hushed voice people use when they're trying not to fall apart. I'd catch phrases like, "He just couldn't handle the pressure. He always had one foot out the door. Some men aren't made for this kind of life." I didn't know what that meant. What kind of life? The kind with a kid? With love? With responsibilities? Was I the pressure? Was I the reason he slipped? I carried those questions like they were facts. And as I got older, I learned how to carry them quietly. In high school, when people complained about their dads being too strict or too nosy or too loud, I wanted to scream. At least they had someone to push back against. I had silence. No curfews. No lectures. No groundings. Just nothing. And nothing is its own kind of punishment. It doesn't teach you boundaries. It doesn't tell you what's right or wrong. It just leaves you to guess. And when you guess wrong, there's no one to help you back up. The first time I got drunk, I was 17. A party. Cheap vodka. Bad decisions. I ended up puking behind a shed, dizzy, ashamed, cold. And I remember, clear as day, thinking, is this what he felt like? Is this what made him leave? Was he just running from the same kind of shame I was drowning in? I got home late that night, crawled into bed, and stared at the ceiling until the room stopped spinning. The next morning, Mom didn't ask questions. She never did. We both learned how to move around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the music. I graduated. Moved out. Started building a life that didn't have his name on it. But he stayed in the background. Like a hum you can't unhear. Like a smell that never really fades. Every choice I made came with the question. Is this me, or is this him? The stubbornness. The silence. The way I push people away when they get too close. I wondered if I was repeating him, without even knowing it. I told myself I was better. But how could I know, if I never knew him? How could I escape a legacy I'd never even seen? And now here I was. 32 years old. Sitting in my kitchen. His boots on the floor. His journal in my hand. And 1,000 unspoken words between us. I opened the next page. March 12th. I don't know if he hates me. I wouldn't blame him if he did. I think about writing a letter, but what would I say? Sorry I left. That's not enough. That's just the truth. And the truth is, I wasn't ready. Not for him. Not for fatherhood. Not for love that asked anything of me. There it was. The confession. The thing I'd waited my whole life to hear. He wasn't ready. And he left because of it. Not because I was too much. Because he wasn't enough. For the first time in a long, long time, I let myself cry. Not for the man he was. But for the boy I had been. The boy who deserved better. It started with the red truck. There was a photo tucked behind the rubber band of the bundle, slightly torn at the corner, washed out like it had been left in the sun too long. A man, my father, leaning against a red pickup truck with a flatbed. One foot on the bumper, arms crossed. Mountains behind him, brush on either side. He was smiling. Not the stiff kind of smile people wear for the camera. A real one. Relaxed. Lived in. There was something haunting about it. That smile didn't belong to the man who left me. That smile belonged to someone else, someone who found something worth staying for. Even if only for a while. On the back of the photo was a scrawl in blue ink. Outside Santa Fe 07. That was all I had. But it was enough. I spent the next week going through every photo in the box. I laid them all out across my kitchen table like a detective piecing together a cold case. Faces I didn't recognize. Backdrops I couldn't name. Time frozen in strangers' laughter. A child who wasn't me. A dog I never met. A birthday cake with 20 candles and no one I could identify standing behind it. He built a life. Several, maybe. And none of them included me. There was one image that caught me hardest. My father sitting in a diner booth, coffee in hand, notebook open, head down in thought. The photo was taken from across the table. Which meant someone had been with him. There was no note on the back of that one. But the corner of the menu showed the name. Blue Cactus Cafe, El Prado, New Mexico. I googled it. It was real. Still open. 2 weeks later, I booked a flight. I told myself I was just curious. that I wanted answers. Closure. But the truth was uglier. I wanted to see if he was better without me. I wanted to see what kind of man he became when he left the wreckage of his first life behind. The kind of man he could be when he wasn't my father. The Blue Cactus Cafe was smaller than I expected. A single strip of painted brick on the edge of a desert town that didn't even have a gas station with working card readers. The air was dry. The sky endless. Everything moved slow, like the heat bent time. I walked in and ordered coffee. Black. My hands were shaking. The waitress looked like she'd been working there since the place opened, silver hair pulled back in a braid, turquoise rings on every finger. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You look like someone I used to know." I didn't answer right away. Then I reached into my backpack and pulled out the photo. The one with the red truck. She took it, held it close to her face. Her expression softened. "I'll be damned," she said. "Mitch." It was the first time I'd heard his name spoken out loud in years. She slid into the booth across from me without asking. "You his boy?" I nodded. "James." She studied me like a story was unfolding right in front of her. "He used to come here every Tuesday. Sat in that corner booth. Ordered the same thing, green chili omelet and black coffee. Scribbled in that little notebook like he was writing the Bible. He never said much. But he had this sadness in him. Like a man who knew he'd already missed too much." I swallowed hard. She handed the photo back. "I liked him. But he was always somewhere else in his head. Said he had a kid once. Said he left him. Said it was the worst thing he ever did." That hit harder than I expected. He talked about me. Not often, maybe. But he said it. Out loud. In this cafe. To this woman whose name I didn't even know. That was more than I'd had before. I asked, "Did he ever say why?" She shook her head slowly. "No. But it haunted him. That much was clear. He'd look out that window sometimes like he was watching something that had already disappeared." We sat in silence for a while. She poured me a second cup without asking. Then she said, "There was someone. A woman. Not from here. She'd come through every few months. Sat with him. Didn't talk much either. They'd just sit and drink coffee." I pulled out the photo of the woman with her hand raised to the sun. "Her?" The waitress nodded. "That's her." I flipped the photo over. No name. No note. Nothing but a date, June 2008. Another dead end. But not really. Because I was getting closer. The photos weren't just images anymore. They were clues. Coordinates. Glimpses into a life I never got to live alongside. And suddenly, I needed to know more. Not just where he'd gone. Who he'd become. I stayed in El Prado for 2 more days. Walked the same trails I'd seen in his photos. Ate at the same diner. Sat in the booth he used to sit in and wrote in a notebook of my own. It felt absurd and holy at the same time. Like I was borrowing someone else's ghost. The air smelled like sagebrush and memory. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt curious. Back in my hotel room, I opened the journal again. April 18th, Taos. I met a woman named Elise. She reminds me of my mistakes. Not because she makes me feel bad, but because she sees through the bullshit. That's rare. She asked if I'd ever go back. I said no. She asked if I ever thought about my son. I said I think about him every damn day. She said then you should write it down. So I did. Beneath that entry was a single line, written like a whisper. "Forgiveness is for the living." I closed the journal and looked down at the boots by the door. His boots. I hadn't worn them since that first night. But I slid them on again. Stood up. Took a step. They fit. They weren't comfortable. But they fit. It started with a fold in the back of the journal. Not a pocket, not marked, just a single page that had been folded into itself, like someone wanted to hide it without really hiding it. I was flipping through, tracing his handwriting with my thumb, when I saw the crease. I unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a journal entry. It was a letter. To James. You were 6 when I left. Maybe 6.5. I remember your backpack. Blue, with a rip in the side pocket you kept pretending wasn't there. I remember the way you used to line up your cereal pieces on the table. I remember the way you'd fall asleep in the back seat, legs crossed, head tilted like you were trying not to dream too loud. I remember more than I let myself admit. I stopped reading. I sat back in my chair and stared at the page like it was glowing. Then I started again. You probably won't believe this, but I didn't leave because of you. I left because I was afraid I was going to hurt you more by staying. I'd look at you and feel like a fraud. Like I'd borrowed something I didn't deserve. Your mother, God bless her, she made it look easy. But me? I couldn't get out of my own head. Couldn't breathe most days. It was like drowning, and fatherhood only made the water deeper. And I knew I was sinking. I thought maybe if I left, I'd save you from watching it happen. But I see now that disappearing only taught you how to vanish too. I'm sorry. Not just for leaving, but for making you think it was about you. It never was. No date. No signature. Just that. I turned the page and found another. Same style. Same voice. Different ache. James, there's so much I don't know about you now. Are you tall? Are you like me? Do you bite your nails? Do you have someone who loves you? I hope so. I hope they see all the things in you I didn't stick around long enough to witness. If I could go back, I'd do one thing different. I'd stay. I wouldn't fix everything. I know that. But I'd stay long enough for you to know I tried. Because effort matters. Presence matters. And I learned that too late. Another page, folded tighter. I unfolded it like it might disintegrate. I saw you once. You didn't see me. You were 13, I think. Walking out of school, backpack too heavy, headphones on. You looked like me when I was young, before the world got too loud. I watched you cross the street and disappear around a corner. And I thought, don't look back. Please don't look back. Because I didn't know what I'd do if you saw me. I didn't think I deserved your eyes. I sat with that line for a long time. I didn't think I deserved your eyes. It was the most human thing I'd ever heard him say. There were more letters. 7 total. All folded. All tucked between pages that otherwise seemed ordinary. Some were shaky. Others clear. Some apologetic. Others full of guilt that had hardened into something like poetry. He never sent any of them. I don't know if he meant to. Maybe he just needed to write them to stay sane. Maybe Elise, the woman from the cafe, had encouraged him to. Maybe he wanted to mail them, but couldn't bear to see the envelope come back with return to sender stamped across it like a final sentence. Or maybe he knew I wouldn't read them until after he was gone. Either way, they were here now. And they changed something in me. Not a lot. Not all at once. But they moved the needle. They softened the edge I'd been living on for so long. Because for the first time, I heard him trying. Not in the moment. Not when it mattered. But still, trying. That counts for something. I called my mom. Told her I found the letters. She didn't say much at first. Then, he used to write at night. I'd see the light on in the garage. Pen in his hand. But he never said what it was for. I asked if she wanted to read them. She said, not yet. Then she said something that stuck with me since. He could have stayed. He chose not to. And I'll never forgive that. But if you can, I won't stand in the way. That night, I read the letters again. This time out loud. I sat in my apartment, boots by the door, journal in my lap, and I read each word like I was standing at a grave with no headstone. The letters didn't give me closure. But they gave me something else. Context. The man who left wasn't empty. He was full. Overfull. Drowning in it. And I was never the reason he ran. I was just the thing he couldn't hold on to while falling. One letter, tucked in the middle of the journal, was different. No greeting. Just, you ever look at a photo of someone and feel like they're staring through time? Like they're asking you, why didn't you fight for me? I see his face in my dreams sometimes. Not angry. Not sad. Just disappointed. And I wake up choking on regret. I hope he never knows what it feels like to be me. That line made my chest cave in. Because I did know what it felt like to be him. To regret. To ache. To wonder what damage I'd already caused by not being enough. And maybe that's what scared me most. That we weren't so different after all. But now I had the letters. Now I had his voice. And maybe that was enough to begin rewriting the ending. Not for him. For me. I started biting my nails again. Not the kind of biting you do out of boredom. The kind you do when something's clawing inside you and your body doesn't know how to scream, so it picks itself apart in silence. I hadn't done it since I was a teenager. But somewhere between reading his letters and walking the trails he once wandered, the habit returned. Unconscious. Automatic. Familiar. The first time I noticed, I was driving. Hands on the wheel. Sunset bleeding across the dashboard. And there it was, my thumbnail between my teeth, chewed raw. Like my body remembered something I didn't. And I thought, was this his too? I started making a list. Not on purpose. Not at first. But as the days passed, the echoes piled up. The way I leave rooms when conversations get too close. The way I drink coffee black and burning, like punishment. The way I deflect compliments like they're bullets. The way I carry silence like armor. The way I disappear without leaving. They weren't things I was taught. They were things I became. And when I traced the lines back, all of them pointed to him. It was like looking in a cracked mirror and seeing both your face and your father's behind it. One night, I pulled out the boots again. Slipped them on. Stood in them for a while. Just stood. And I thought about all the places they'd been. All the miles he walked trying to outrun the version of himself that couldn't stay. All the mornings he woke up not knowing where he'd go next. All the nights he probably drank alone with the lights off and a notebook in his lap, writing letters to a son he thought he didn't deserve. I wore the boots and walked around my apartment. Pacing slow heel first. They didn't hurt, but they didn't fit right either. They were broken in by someone who walked differently than me. Someone who limped in places I still didn't understand. I found another photo. Folded between 2 pages in the journal. A younger version of him, 20-something maybe, leaning against a bridge railing, cigarette in hand, eyes down. Same crooked jaw. Same fro in the brow. Same tired posture I'd seen in the mirror on days I couldn't explain why I was sad. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I propped it up against my lamp and sat across from it. Like I was waiting for him to speak. And maybe, in a way, he did. Because I started remembering things I hadn't let myself feel in years. The nights I came home drunk just to feel something. The mornings I woke up and stared at the ceiling, too heavy to move. The way I sabotaged every relationship that asked me to be vulnerable. The way I said, I'm fine, even when I wasn't. Especially when I wasn't. I'd always told myself I was different from him. That I'd left the damage behind. But now I wasn't so sure. In one of the last letters he wrote, he said, there are 2 kinds of men, the ones who run, and the ones who learn how to stay. I ran. I pray you're the other kind. I wasn't. Not completely. I ran too. Just in different ways. I ran by hiding inside my work. I ran by never letting anyone stay long enough to see me crack. I ran by building a life out of routines instead of relationships. I didn't run from a family. I ran from myself. And suddenly, I didn't feel so different from him. Suddenly, the anger I'd carried for years started to feel like grief wearing a mask. Because what scared me more than becoming him was realizing I already had. That night I sat on my balcony. City noise below. A beer sweating in my hand. The boots beside me like sleeping dogs. I thought about calling someone. My mom. An old friend. anyone. Just to say, "Hey, I'm not okay tonight." But I didn't. I just sat there, holding everything he didn't say, and everything I never knew how to. Sometimes I wonder if this is how cycles begin. Not with decisions, but with defaults. With the things we inherit without question. The things we wear like skin. The fears we don't even know aren't ours. I was afraid of needing people too much. Afraid of being left. Afraid of being seen. Afraid of failing quietly, the way he did. And in all that fear, I'd become a man who lived halfway inside his own life. But now I had a choice. Not a clean one. Not a big cinematic moment. Just a quiet chance to step off the path. To take off the boots. To speak when it's easier to stay quiet. To stay when it's easier to leave. To forgive, not just him, but me too. Because I had been carrying more than his story. I'd been carrying his shape. His shadow. His silence. And I was tired. The next morning, I packed the boots back in the box. Not out of resentment. Out of respect. Because they belonged to him. And I was done walking in shoes that weren't mine. I waited until fall to ask her. I don't know why. Maybe I needed the leaves to change before I could. Maybe I was hoping that time, like seasons, could soften things if I waited long enough. But time doesn't heal everything. Sometimes it just makes the silence deeper. So I drove home. Back to the house I grew up in. Smaller than I remembered. The driveway cracked. The porch steps still groaning beneath your feet like they've got secrets of their own. She was in the kitchen when I walked in. Same faded apron. Same smell of onions and garlic and warmth. She smiled when she saw me. "You're early," she said. "Dinner's not ready." "I didn't come for dinner." She paused. Wiped her hands on a towel. Tilted her head in that way she always did when she knew something was coming. "I want to talk about him." And just like that, the air shifted. We sat at the table. 2 cups of tea between us. No photos. No journal. No boots. Just her version of the man I'd been chasing. She looked older than I remembered. Not tired exactly, but worn. Like time had used her more than it was supposed to. She said, "I knew this day would come." I didn't say anything. She took a sip, then began. "He was beautiful when I met him. Not in the traditional way. But something about him. God, he felt things so deeply. He'd talk about the stars like they were secrets. He could make you believe in anything for 5 minutes. That was his magic." I tried to picture it. My father, the man with the cracked boots and quiet regret, talking about constellations. She smiled like she'd gone back there. He was gentle. At first. Careful. We used to sit on the hood of his car and listen to Springsteen with the windows down. He called me red because of my hair. Said I glowed like fire when the sun hit me right. Then her smile faded. But he was also restless. Never settled. Even when he was still, you could feel him pulling away. "When did it change?" I asked. She laughed, but it was hollow. "It didn't. That's the thing. The part of him that left us? It was always there. It just got louder. Lonelier." She looked at me for a long time. "You were 3 the first time he disappeared." I blinked. 3? She nodded. 3 days. No call. No note. Just gone. I found him in a motel off the interstate. Said he needed space. Said being a dad felt like drowning. That word again. Drowning. He used it in the journal, too. I whispered it back to her, more to myself than to her. He said the same thing? That it felt like drowning. She nodded like that didn't surprise her at all. I tried to help him. Therapy. Church. Writing. Anything. But you can't save someone who doesn't want to be rescued. Then she looked at me, suddenly stern. You need to know something. When he left, it wasn't noble. It wasn't some selfless act to spare us pain. He left because he was a coward. Because staying meant facing himself. I felt that in my gut. But I also felt something else, disagreement. Not because she was wrong, but because it wasn't the whole truth. He wrote me letters, I said. She looked down. I know. You read them? He showed me some. Years later. Asked if I'd send them. I told him not to. Said he didn't get to drop back in just because he felt guilty. Why? Her voice cracked for the first time. Because I was angry. Because I was scared you'd forgive him too easily. Because I didn't want you to think love could look like that. We sat in silence for a long time. I hated him, she said finally. Not for leaving. For making me the one who had to explain it. Then she added quieter. I hated that you still asked for him. Even after everything. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only thing that felt honest. I still do. In some ways. She nodded, eyes glassy. Me too. That was her version. Not cleaner. Not simpler. Just different. She wasn't wrong. But neither was he. And that's the hardest part, isn't it? When both people are telling the truth as they know it, and still, there's a wound between them that never heals. Later that night, she found me in my old room. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a photo I'd brought with me. My father, in his 20s, laughing. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You look like him, she said. I know. You're not him. I know. Then, after a pause, but sometimes I'm afraid I am. She walked in, sat beside me, put her hand on mine. You carry his face. His voice. Maybe some of his wounds. But you don't carry his choices. That stuck. You don't carry his choices. It's a strange relief, realizing that your DNA isn't a script. That just because you come from something broken doesn't mean you have to live broken too. The next morning, I hugged her a little longer than usual. She held me like she knew it might be the last time I asked. As I pulled away, she whispered, Tell your version too. Don't let ours be the only ones that get remembered. I didn't know what that meant then. But now, writing this, I do. He wrote about her often. Not by name, at least not at first. But in tone. In the quiet shifts between entries. In the way his words softened around certain dates. There was a woman in his life during those years. One he never introduced, never married, but returned to like a porch light on long drives. I found her name in the May 2011 entry. Elise said I should leave the porch light on, even when I'm not expecting anyone. Says it makes the house feel less lonely. Sometimes I think she's talking about herself. Sometimes I think she's talking about me. Elise. I remembered that name from the Blue Cactus Cafe. The silver-haired waitress who said a woman used to visit with him. Quiet. Observant. Present. And I remembered something else, a postcard. I dug it out of the box that night. It had fallen between 2 pages of the journal, creases deep, stamp faded. On the front, a landscape of pine trees, river stones, and a single wooden cabin by the water. On the back. You'd love it here. Peaceful, finally. Postmarked from Pagosa Springs, Colorado. I drove there. 6 hours through winding canyons and sun-warped hills. The kind of landscape that humbles you. The kind of silence that makes you realize how loud your mind really is. Pagosa Springs was small, slow-moving. Touristy in some spots, untouched in others. The kind of place people go when they're tired of being seen. I asked about him at a hardware store using the photo from the box, the one with him sitting outside a cabin porch, book in lap, dog at his feet. The man behind the counter squinted. Yeah. Mitch. I remember him. He pointed me to the edge of town. Said there was a woman out by the river, carved spoons for a living. She used to be close with him. If anyone knows, it's her. It was Elise. She lived in a cabin that looked almost identical to the one on the postcard. The same slanted roof. The same red paint flaking off the siding. I knocked once. Heard a dog bark from inside. Then the door creaked open. And there she was. Elise. Late 60s, maybe. Weathered in the way mountain people are, lined face, bright eyes, steady hands. She wore a faded sweatshirt and jeans and a calm I envied instantly. She looked at me like she'd been expecting this for years. You're James. Not a question. I nodded. She didn't smile. She stepped aside and said, "Come in." Her home was full of wood. Smelled like cedar and tea leaves. Spoons lined the walls like artwork, each one carved differently. She motioned for me to sit. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said. "I didn't even know you existed until a few weeks ago." She nodded. Still. I took the journal out of my bag. Opened it to one of the entries that mentioned her. Elise makes silence feel like music. I think that's what love is. Not noise. Just the space someone holds for you, even when you don't know how to ask. I read it aloud. She didn't cry. But her eyes flickered. "He wrote a lot," I said. "He had to," she replied. "He wasn't good at saying it." "What was he to you?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "A friend. A partner. Sometimes a ghost." I let that sit. Then she added, "He loved you." I shook my head. "Not enough to stay." "No," she agreed. "Not enough to stay. But that doesn't mean he didn't love you." I didn't know how to respond. So she told me a story. The first time he came to Pagosa, he was passing through. Stayed at a motel for 2 nights. Came into her shop looking for a screwdriver to fix his tailgate. He didn't know what kind he needed, so she offered to help. He came back the next day. Said thanks. Brought her coffee. Then disappeared for 6 months. Then he came back again. And kept coming back. She said, "He never unpacked all the way. But he tried. That counts for something." "He wrote me letters," I said. "Never sent them." "He showed me some," she replied. "He asked if they were worth sending." I told him that wasn't my call. "Why didn't he send them?" "Shame," she said simply. "He didn't think he deserved to be forgiven." "He didn't," I said. She nodded. "Maybe not. But sometimes we need grace more than we need justice." That stuck with me. Grace more than justice. I didn't know if I had it in me. But I wanted to. Before I left, she handed me a small wooden box. "He left this here. Told me to give it to you if you ever came." Inside were more photos. And a note. Not a letter. Just a sentence. "You'll know what parts to keep. And what to leave behind." I looked at Elise. "Did he ever say goodbye?" She smiled faint. "No. But I think he was always trying to." I drove back in silence. The journal beside me. The box of photos in the passenger seat. And in my chest something shifting. He was a man who couldn't stay. But he found someone who stayed anyway. And maybe that's what saved the last part of him. Not redemption. But being seen. That was the first goodbye. Not to a man. But to the version of him I'd held on to for so long. The villain. The coward. The wound. And in its place, something Messier. Something human. Not a clean goodbye. But a necessary one. The night I got back from Pagosa Springs, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the lights off, the box of photos on my chest, the journal on the floor beside me. My apartment hummed with quiet, refrigerator, distant traffic, the occasional creak in the ceiling like the building was exhaling. My head wouldn't shut up. Not about him. About me. Because for weeks, I'd been staring at his life like a map I was trying to read in reverse. But now I had to look at my own. Not the version I told people about. Not the "I'm fine" version I rehearsed over coffee or at work or on dates. The real one. The one that still checked the locks 3 times. The one that left voicemails unsent. The one that forgot how to answer the question, "How are you?" without lying just enough to be left alone. I turned over and stared at the ceiling. The question burned. Am I just him later? I thought about all the ways I'd become like him without noticing. The way I shut down during conflict. The way I craved solitude like oxygen. The way I believed I had to earn love, even after someone already gave it. The way I disappeared when I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. And maybe the worst. The way I never let anyone get close enough to see me bleed. I had always sworn I wouldn't be like him. But now I wasn't so sure I hadn't already started. Not with a suitcase by the door. But with emotional exits. With habits. With silence. With the need to control my world so tightly that nothing could get inside, even the good stuff. That's how it starts, isn't it? Not with abandonment. But with withdrawal. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Her name was Sarah. We dated for 2 years. She left when I couldn't open up. When I said things like, "It's not you," and "I just need space," and "I don't know how to talk about this." She answered on the third ring. "James?" "Yeah." "Hey." "Wow." "Hi." I took a breath. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Did you leave because I reminded you of someone?" There was a pause. Then she said, "You reminded me of someone who wanted to love me, but didn't know how." She wasn't cruel about it. She was just right. And for the first time, I didn't defend myself. Didn't explain it away. Didn't say, "I was trying." Because trying doesn't mean anything if it never reaches the other person. After I hung up, I stood in front of the mirror. Stared. My father's jaw. My father's hands. My father's haunted eyes. And I whispered, "I don't want to be you." Not in hatred. In mourning. Because part of me already was. And that part had to die for me to live differently. I started writing again. Not in the journal. Not for him. For me. It wasn't beautiful. Or deep. Or poetic. It was scratchy. Messy. Honest. I wrote things like, "Today I almost didn't get out of bed. I said no when I wanted to say yes. I told someone how I really felt. I was kind to myself, even when I didn't feel like I deserved it." I started building new habits. One at a time. Leaving voice memos for friends. Sitting in silence without checking out. Crying when I needed to cry. Saying, "I'm scared," instead of pretending I wasn't. They weren't grand gestures. They were small, stubborn acts of rebellion against the legacy I carried in my chest like a stone. One morning, I pulled the boots from the closet. I held them like an old wound. Ran my hand along the cracked leather. Thought about the miles they'd walked. The weight they held. The shame soaked into their soles. I took them outside. Dug a hole in the small patch of dirt by my apartment's back wall. And I buried them. Not to erase him. To release him. Because I didn't need to wear his life anymore to learn from it. Later that day, I texted Sarah again. Just one line. "I'm trying again. This time for real." She replied. "Then I'm rooting for you. Even if it's from a distance." Breaking the mirror isn't about smashing it. It's about choosing not to let it define your shape. It's about saying, "I see the reflection. I see the resemblance. But I choose my own face." I put it off for a week. The last page. I knew it was there. Had flipped past it a dozen times. Knew it was short. Knew it was unfinished. Knew it scared me in a way I didn't want to name. It sat there like a breath held too long. Like a sentence interrupted. Like the moment before a door closes and you're still deciding whether to follow. I finally opened it on a Tuesday morning. The air outside was gray. Rain on the window. The kind of quiet that makes everything feel slower. I sat at the kitchen table, journal flat, fingers on the edge like I was afraid it might vanish if I didn't hold it steady. The handwriting was familiar now. Slightly crooked. Pressed too hard in places. Letters running into each other like he was writing faster than his hand could keep up. And there it was. August 2nd. If he ever finds this, I hope he understands that I never stopped thinking about him. Not once. Not even in the quietest days. I've written so many versions of this goodbye. Most of them sounded like excuses. Or begging. Or stories I was trying to convince myself were true. But this is the honest one. This is the one where I say, that's where it ends. No period. No next line. No signature. Just white space. An open ending. A page left waiting. I stared at it for a long time. Not hoping more words would appear. Not wishing for some hidden message. Just sitting with what wasn't there. There's a kind of silence only unfinished words can carry. He meant to say something. Maybe sorry. Maybe goodbye. Maybe nothing that neat. Maybe he was just trying to say, I loved you. And maybe it scared him too much to write it down. I thought I'd feel cheated. Thought I'd be angry. But I wasn't. I felt peace. Because for once, there was no manipulation. No performance. No filtered version of the truth. Just a man, pen in hand, heart cracked open, trying. And even though the sentence never finished, I understood. I think the last entry wasn't for me. It was with me. An unfinished handoff. A bridge he couldn't quite cross. A sentence he left for me to complete. I took a pen from my drawer. Held it over the page. And I wrote. I say I wish I'd learned how to stay. I wish I'd known how to be the kind of father he deserved. I wish I could have told him this in person. But if he's reading it now, maybe he already knows. Then I turned the page. On the blank side, I wrote something else. Not for him. For me. I will stay. I will try. I will speak, even when I'm afraid. I will love, even when it hurts. I will not run. And if I ever become a father, I'll leave more than a box behind. That night, I placed the journal back in the shoebox. Not to bury it. Not to forget. But because it had served its purpose. It was no longer a confession. No longer a wound. It was a doorway. And I had walked through it. It's strange. I never got the goodbye I wanted. But somehow, I still got the ending I needed. There's a trail just outside the city. A little dirt path that winds through a patch of woods, barely enough trees to drown out the traffic. But if you walk far enough, you stop hearing the noise. And for a little while, it feels like the edge of something untouched. I walked it this morning. Boots on my feet, not his. New ones? Mine. Still stiff in the heel. Still molding to my shape. I took slow steps. Thought about how long it took to get here. How many years I spent circling the same ache. How many times I opened that journal looking for an answer when what I really needed was a mirror. And now I was here. Different. Still healing. Still learning. But no longer lost. I sat on a bench halfway through the trail. Watched two kids throw stones into a creek. Heard them laughing. Heard a voice call out. Not too far, stay where I can see you. Their dad. He wasn't loud. He wasn't perfect. But he was there. And that mattered. That still matters. Sometimes I imagine having a son of my own. Sometimes I imagine what I'd say when he asks about my dad. And this is what I'd want him to know. Your grandfather was a complicated man. He was kind and broken. He was brilliant and afraid. He didn't stay, but he didn't forget me, either. And I forgive him. Not because he earned it. But because I won't carry him into your life like a shadow. I want to carry light now. I've learned that legacy isn't what we leave in a will. It's what we pass down through silence. Through gestures. Through the way we love when it's hard. And I choose to pass down something different. Something softer. Something warmer. Something whole. I don't wear his boots anymore. But I don't hate them either. I kept them in a cedar box tucked away. Not as a trophy. Not as a warning. As a reminder. Of where I come from. Of what I chose. Of who I became anyway. To the man who left. I forgive you. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But enough. I see you now. In full. And I'm letting go. To the boy I used to be, You didn't do anything wrong. You were lovable. You were worthy. You were never the reason he left. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it out loud. To the man I'm becoming. Keep going. Keep choosing presence. Keep choosing gentleness. Keep choosing the truth, even when it shakes. You are not your father. But he is part of you. Let him be the soil, not the root. Let him be the start, not the shape. The past still walks beside me. But it no longer leads. And that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting. But walking forward. In my own shoes. They called me Thursday morning. I was standing in the produce aisle at a Safeway in Pittsburgh, trying to decide between two different brands of overpriced grapes, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Wish I hadn't. Is this James Lauren? Yes. This is Marie Harker. I'm Coach Dugan's sister. Just like that. Not was. Is. Even in death, the man still commanded present tense. She didn't cry. Didn't fumble. Just said the facts straight. He died in his sleep. Massive stroke. Didn't feel it. Didn't suffer. Left everything in order. Had my name in a folder. He wanted you to speak at the service. I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, okay. Even though I didn't mean it yet. I hadn't seen him in almost 8 years. Not since he showed up to my college graduation, uninvited, sat in the back row, then vanished before I could say anything. He left a card tucked into the windshield of my car. Proud of you. Stay sharp. Keep your knees bent. No signature. Just his handwriting. Just the smell of that goddamn cologne that always reminded me of sweat and cigarette ash. I drove down that Friday. 12 hours. No music for the first 5. Just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional road rage mutter when someone cut me off on I-70. Home hadn't changed. Still the same rusted-out welcome sign. Same gas station where he used to buy me orange Gatorade after practice. Same bitter air. Marie met me at the door of the house, his house. She looked older, softer. Said I looked tired. I told her I always looked tired. She laughed. Led me inside. It smelled the same. Leather. Dust. Old newspapers. That heavy, lived-in scent that clung to men like him. The living room was dark. Plaques on the wall. Trophies in a glass case. A framed photo of our 2005 championship team right above the fireplace. I was in the center. Number 88. Helmet under one arm. Trying too hard to look like I wasn't trying. Marie made tea. Told me she was staying with her daughter across town, but the guest room was mine if I wanted it. I almost said no. But something about the way she looked at me, hopeful and tired and gently expectant, made me say yes. The guest room hadn't changed either. Twin bed. Wood paneling. Closet with one sliding door that stuck halfway. A desk with a broken leg from when I slammed my fist on it senior year. That was the night he told me I wasn't ready to lead. I cried in this room. Quietly. Into a pillow. 15 minutes before lights out. Because he had a rule. Real men cry on their own time. The journals were in the closet. 3 of them. Black leather bound. No titles. No dust. Stacked neatly in an old shoebox next to a pair of sneakers I recognized but never saw him wear. I didn't open them right away. Didn't even touch them. But I saw my name written on the spine of the top one. In white paint pen. Lauren, 2002 to 2006. And just like that, my stomach turned. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan that never turned. Thought about the whistle. The one he used to wear like a rosary. He didn't blow it often. Just let it dangle from his neck, silver and cold and waiting. And when it did sound, it meant something. Fall in line. Pick up speed. Drop and give him 20. He never hit us. Never cursed. He didn't have to. He just looked at you. He just knew where to press. He once made me run wind sprints in the snow because I missed a tackle and said sorry instead of mine. He said, "You don't apologize in the middle of a play. You own it. Or don't bother stepping on my field again." I ran until I threw up. And I thanked him after. That was the part one can't forget. I thanked him. I turned the lamp off around 1 a.m. Slept restlessly. Dreamed of a locker room that wouldn't let me leave. A voice that called me son and soldier in the same breath. Tomorrow was the funeral. I was supposed to speak. Supposed to stand in front of a town that still saw him as a saint, and say something that made people nod. But all I could think about was that journal in the closet. And the way he used to say, "I didn't raise boys. I forged men." I waited until after the funeral. Didn't even touch the box that morning. Didn't want it in my head while I stood at the podium with my suit too tight and my voice pretending to be strong. The gymnasium was full. Not just teammates and parents, but firemen, teachers, barbers, men who still stood like they were on his line, even now. They played that grainy highlight reel on the projector. Everyone laughed when it froze on the shot of him in his windbreaker, barking into a headset like the game was life or death. To him, maybe it was. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't say what I'd planned. I looked out over the crowd, over Marie, over his former assistants, over the boys he'd shaped, and I said, "Coach Dugan didn't save my life. He gave it rules." The room went quiet. I went on. "He taught me how to stand, how to shut up, how to grind it out. I didn't always like him. I still don't know if I loved him. But I know I listened. And I know I learned. And I know I wouldn't be standing here if he hadn't handed me a playbook when no one else did." They clapped. Some even stood. I walked off the stage and sat down with shaking hands. Because I hadn't lied. But I hadn't told the truth either. That night, after the reception and the handshakes and the polite, "You turned out well" comments from men who never called me when he stopped, I went back to the guest room and opened the journal. I don't know what I expected. Letters, maybe. Some old training schedules. Maybe one of those motivational quotes he used to tape to the locker room mirror. What I found instead was data. First entry. August 22nd, 02. Lauren, Frosh quiet. Runs well. Afraid of contact. Shows potential. Will need to break that softness. Comes from fractured home, father absent. Watch for overcorrection, might push too hard to please. Could be a captain in 4 years if groomed correctly. Groomed. That word landed like a slap. I flipped to the next page. Then the next. Then another. Each page was another practice. Another note. A record of my performance, my attitude, my emotional responses. September 14th, hung head after fumble. Ran 5 laps. Spoke to him after practice. Told him men don't look at the ground. Seemed to understand. Will reinforce with film session. October 3rd, asked for water break during drill. Denied. Complained. Sent him to run stairs. Cried in locker room. Waited 10 minutes. Told him crying is fine, but not where others can see. Softness is a private matter. I felt sick. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I hadn't. Every entry was a moment I thought I'd imagined. Every punishment, every silence, every cold lesson, I thought they'd been incidental. Reactive. But they weren't. They were planned. Measured. Intentional. Page after page he tracked me. Called me a project. A long game. Promising, but too attached to being liked. There were notes about my voice cracking. My posture. My excessive need for approval. Even a line about my mom's car being late once. Arrived late for pickup again. Mother overwhelmed. Needs male structure. Must stay consistent. He'll bend to stability. Bend. Not trust. Not grow. Bend. There was praise too. But always controlled. He made a key tackle today. Didn't celebrate. Good. Beginning to internalize expectations. Benched him for missed homework. Didn't argue. Seems to be learning who's in charge. It wasn't a journal. It was a manual. Not for football. For me. And the worst part? It worked. I sat on the floor with that book in my lap and remembered the way I used to tell people, "Coach is like a father to me." And I meant it. Because I didn't know what a father was supposed to feel like. I just knew he showed up. He pushed me. He taught me how to hold pain without flinching. He clapped my shoulder when I got it right. And when I got it wrong, he didn't yell. He just withheld. Until I begged to earn it back. I read until 2 a.m. Stopped at the entry for my final game. November 18th, 06, Lauren played hard. Took a hit in Q3, got up too slow. Looked rattled. Pulled him. He was angry. Good. Anger is drive when guided. He'll remember this. Can't let him end feeling too big. That's not what makes men strong. Adversity leaves a cleaner edge. I put the book back in the closet. Stacked it neatly. Turned off the light. Laid in bed and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in years I didn't feel like his soldier. I felt like a blueprint. One I hadn't drawn. It was the photo that brought the memory back. Tucked inside the second journal, near the back flap. Me, shirtless, covered in sweat, holding a weight bar over my head like I just won a war. Coach beside me, sunglasses on, hand on my shoulder, mid-laugh. On the back, his handwriting in thick marker. July 18th, mind over body. It wasn't staged. But it wasn't honest either. That summer used to live in my memory like a badge. The year he invited me to live with him. To focus up, he said. To avoid distractions. To get my head straight before college recruiters came sniffing. Mom was working double shifts at the hospital back then. She said she was proud I had a place to go that cared about discipline. I said, yeah. What I meant was, I need someone to tell me what to be. He picked me up in June. Loaded my duffel into the back of his truck and said, "This summer's going to suck. That's how you know it matters." I laughed. He didn't. The schedule was taped to the fridge. Typed. Laminated. Pinned with a magnet that said, "Pain is weakness leaving the body. Monday through Saturday. 5:30 a.m. Wake. 6 o'clock, run 5 miles. 7:15, breakfast, 2 eggs, toast, protein shake. 8 o'clock, weights, upper/lower split. 10 o'clock, film study. 12 o'clock, lunch, turkey, rice, greens. 1 to 3 o'clock, work hour, yard chores, garage clean up, errands. 4 o'clock, conditioning drills. 6 o'clock, dinner. 7 o'clock, mental reps, journaling, visualization, goal planning. 9:30, lights out. Sundays were active rest, stretching, swimming laps, reading assigned books. One of them was Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. A novel about Spartan warriors. He underlined entire paragraphs and made me recite them. You train for the man beside you. You fight for the phalanx. I used to repeat that line under my breath when I couldn't sleep. At the time, I called it discipline. Now I wonder if it was something else. I remember the first time I skipped the run. It was week 3. My knees were sore. Blisters on both arches. Didn't hear the alarm, or told myself I didn't. I came downstairs at 6:20. He was waiting. Sitting at the table. Whistle on the counter. Not touching it. Just letting it remind me who I belonged to. I said, "I needed the rest." He said, "You're not tired. You're testing me." Then he made me run 8 miles. No breakfast. No music. Just the heat and his truck crawling beside me while he called out. Real men don't skip pain. They absorb it. He never hit me. But he punished me with precision. A missed chore meant no dinner. A late answer meant push-ups. If I questioned the lesson, he'd send me to the garage and make me read my journal entries aloud until I found the weakness in them. That's what he called it. Identifying soft spots. But there were good days, too. At least I thought there were. Grilling steaks on the back patio, him talking about his days as a linebacker at Pitt. How his dad left. How the Corps made him hard. How he learned to never let a boy cry for too long. You feel it, you name it, you kill it, he said. Simple. I believed him. I wrote it down. There was one night that's clearer than the rest. Late July. The air still, thick with crickets and sweat. We were sitting on the back steps. I was nursing a pulled hamstring, trying not to show it. He passed me a cold can of Coke. No lecture. No rules. Just a drink. You're doing better than I did at your age, he said. I looked over, startled. He never gave compliments freely. Smarter. More focused. You could lead. Then he looked right at me. But you've got to kill the part of you that still wants to be liked. I nodded. Drank the Coke like it was communion. Now, sitting in that same house all these years later, I realized something. That summer wasn't mentorship. It was grooming. Not in the darkest way. But in the way men pass their unfinished selves to the next body. He wasn't making me stronger. He was trying to erase the softness in me that reminded him of himself. He couldn't cry, so I wasn't allowed to. He couldn't be weak, so mine had to be punished. He wasn't teaching me to be a man. He was trying to rewrite his own script. And I let him. I didn't cry that summer. Not once. But I wanted to. In that guest room. On the 5th mile. In the garage, reading my doubts out loud to a man who believed pain was the only teacher. I used to tell people that was the summer I became myself. Now I think it was the summer I lost him. Not as a coach. But as a man I could trust. I put the photo back in the journal. Closed it. Sat on the bed for a long time. And said out loud to no one, "You were never my father." Then I said, "But I still miss you." And that was the part one hadn't known until now. I found Marie in the kitchen. Saturday morning. Steam curling from a chipped mug. Radio playing some old Motown song like the house had finally exhaled after the funeral. She was sitting in his chair. Not the recliner. Not the one by the fireplace. But the small wooden one by the table, worn smooth from years of meals and memories. She looked up when I walked in. "Couldn't sleep," she said. I nodded. "Me either." She gestured to the stove. Coffee already brewed. One mug waiting. As if she knew I'd come. I sat. Hands around the ceramic like it might ground me. Either of us spoke for a minute. Just sipped. Listened to the radio hum. Then she said, "You found them, didn't you?" I didn't pretend. "Yeah. I did." She didn't look surprised. Just tired. "I always knew he kept records," she said. "Ever since we were kids." I looked over. She smiled, faint and sad. "Not journals like that. But notebooks. Charts. Lists. He used to track everything. My bedwetting. My test scores. The time I cried at Dad's funeral and he didn't." I set my mug down. "You ever ask why?" She nodded slowly. "He said it made him feel in control." She stood. Opened a cabinet. Pulled out a yellow folder. Handed it to me. Inside, a photocopy of a hospital intake form. A juvenile case file. Some scrawled notes from a therapist. Dugan, Richard, age 14. Anger displacement. Flat effect. Hyperfixation on routine and control. Possible trauma response, origin unclear. I looked up. She was already watching me. "He was 13 when our father died," she said. "Found him in the garage. Shotgun still in his hands. Mom never talked about it." I stared at the page. "He never told me. He never told anyone." She sat down again. Folded her hands. "He took care of me after that," she said. "Made my lunch. Walked me to school. Set the clocks. Paid the bills. All before he was 15. A long breath. "But he never touched me. Never hugged me. Never let me cry after that one time. Why not? Because, she said, eyes wet now. He thought grief was a luxury. I leaned back in the chair, letting it all settle. The journals. The routines. The sermons dressed as discipline. And I saw it, how the boy who'd once been powerless decided the only safe way forward was to never be surprised again. Even if it meant hurting the people he thought he was helping. He was proud of you, she said suddenly. He had a strange way of showing it. Marie nodded. He did. I swallowed. Then asked the question I hadn't been able to say aloud since I got there. Did he love us? Any of us? She looked at me. Really looked. Then said, yes. But only in the ways he was taught were allowed. Silence sat between us. Not heavy. Just known. Then she reached for my hand. Held it. And said soft. You don't have to carry the way he loved you like it's law. I almost broke. Right there. Because that was it. The thing I hadn't known I needed permission for. I could let it down. Not forgive it. Not forget it. But let it belong to him, not me. We sat in that kitchen a while longer. Talking about the boy he was. The man he became. The silence they grew up inside. And when I left the table, I felt something new in my chest. Room. Not peace, not yet. But space for it. I found the tape in the den. It wasn't labeled. Just champs, written in thick black Sharpie. Stuck between old coaching manuals and a dusty stack of Sports Illustrateds. I wasn't looking for it. Wasn't even sure they still had a VCR. But when I slid the drawer open beneath the TV, there it was, big, clunky, beige plastic like it belonged to a different decade. I stared at the slot for a minute. Then slid the tape in. The screen went blue. Then static. Then that grainy opening shot I hadn't seen in almost 20 years. State Final, 2005. We won that game. I remember that much. 24-17. Rain on the field. A fourth-quarter touchdown that sent the stands into chaos. They called it the best game coach ever coached. Called me the best player he ever molded. I used to be proud of that. Now I wasn't sure what to feel. The tape rolled. No commentary. Just the raw sideline feed. Camera shaking with the wind. Zooms too slow. Voices muffled by the mic. I watched myself warm up, number 88, helmet swinging from one hand, head down like I was trying to stay invisible in the spotlight. Then the game began. And I saw it. Not just the plays. But him. Coach. Right there on the sideline. Never blinking. Never smiling. Eyes locked on me like I was the only player on the field. Every time I touched the ball, the camera caught him reacting. Not cheering. Not gesturing. Just tracking. Writing something in that little black notebook he always carried. One hand moving, eyes never leaving me. Even when I messed up. Especially then. Third drive, second quarter, I slipped on a route, lost footing, missed a pass. I remember that moment. Thought about it for weeks afterward. Blamed the cleats. Watching it now, I saw something else. Coach's face. The flicker in his jaw. The way he turned slightly away from the sideline, like he couldn't bear the failure, even secondhand. Then the notebook again. Then the whistle. Then the sub. I fast-forwarded. Fourth quarter. Game tied. Ball on the 32-yard line. Coach calls a sweep, my route. I remember feeling my heart beat through my ribs. I remember hearing his voice in my helmet from the sideline headset. Cut hard. Take the hit. Earn it. I did. Caught the pass. Spun off one tackle. Fought for the extra 5 yards. Went down on the 3-yard line. Crowd exploded. Coach didn't move. He didn't even blink. Just turned to the assistant coach, said something too quiet to catch, and wrote it down. We scored on the next play. Took the lead. Held it. Won. The field rushed. The camera shook. Boys cried. Helmets flew. confetti. And there he was. In the center of it. Not celebrating. Just pulling me close. One arm around my neck, the other gripping my jersey tight like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. I used to remember that hug as love. But watching it now, it felt more like ownership. I paused the tape. Backed it up. Watched the play again. Saw myself take the hit. Saw him not even flinch. And I realized. He wasn't watching to witness. He was watching to measure. To record. To reinforce. I wasn't a player. I was proof. That his system worked. That control paid off. That emotionless discipline bred glory. I ejected the tape. Held it in my hands. Thought about smashing it. Then didn't. Not because I wanted to keep it. But because I needed to remember. I used to believe that game was the best day of my life. But it wasn't mine. It was his. Later that night, I opened the journal again. Found the entry. November 19th, 05. Lauren performed well. Took contact. Didn't flinch. Executed despite emotional load, father absent, mother working. Extra yards show conditioning paid off. Might be ready for captaincy if kept emotionally in check. Might be ready. Even after all that. Even after the trophy, the headlines, the goddamn hug on the field. Still might. It wasn't love. It was evaluation. And I lived under it like a sun that burned and promised light at the same time. I closed the book. Tucked the tape in the bottom drawer. And whispered, to no one in particular. I don't need your notes anymore. It was Marie who found it. Sunday morning. The house quieter than usual. Sun cutting through the blinds in long, soft ribbons. I was sitting in the den, thumbing through the final journal, the one with no name on the spine, just the years, 2009 to 2014. Mostly notes on former players. Some about himself. Things like back pain increasing, knees unreliable, vision blurred at night. Might need to retire soon. Don't know who I'd be without this. I was halfway through an entry about a former linebacker who never internalized the system, when Marie knocked on the doorframe. She was holding an envelope. Cream-colored. No stamp. Just my name written across the front in all caps. James Lauren. Found it in the drawer by his bed, she said. Under a stack of receipts. Wasn't sure if I should give it to you. I stood. Took it. It was heavier than I expected. Sealed untouched. She didn't linger. Just said, take your time. And left me there. I stared at it for a long time. Half expecting it to crumble in my hands like the rest of what he left behind. I didn't want an apology. Not anymore. But some dumb part of me hoped for something human. Something messy. Something real. I sat down. Slid my finger beneath the flap. Opened it. Unfolded the single page. It read, James, I've watched men break and call it growth. I've watched boys burn and call it strength. I watched you become both. I kept more from you than I should have. I kept myself from you, and maybe that was the right thing at the time. Maybe not. I don't know how to be anything other than what I made myself into. And what I made you into, well, that's something you'll have to decide for yourself. I pushed you because I believed you were worth it. I didn't protect you from me because I believed I was right. I may have been wrong. I don't know if I'd do it different, even if I knew how. If you're reading this, I hope you've found peace in what I couldn't give you. Or at least found the edge of it. That would be enough. Coach. That was it. No. I'm sorry. No. I regret what I did. Just a collection of almosts. Maybe. I don't know. I couldn't. You'll have to decide. I read it again. And again. Each time, the words got tighter. Like a rubber band stretching between my ribs. This wasn't an apology. It was a confession without consequence. It didn't ask for anything. But it didn't offer anything either. No warmth. No real vulnerability. Just a man, inventorying the damage and stepping back like that absolved him. I folded the letter, placed it on the desk, and I thought, you always got close. But never all the way. That was the way he lived. He didn't teach love. He studied it. Filed it under not useful. Replaced it with systems. Schedules. Drills. Structure. And when love tried to show up anyway, he blew the whistle and called it weakness. But here's the worst part. I still wanted more. Even now. Even after the journals and the punishments and the years of obedience disguised as purpose. Some small part of me read that letter and thought, if I could just ask the right question, maybe he'd answer the way I needed. But that part of me? That part was his. Not mine. So I burned it. In the fireplace. Letter. Envelope. Everything. Watched the edges curl and blacken, paper collapsing into itself like it finally knew it didn't have to stand for anything anymore. Marie didn't ask what I was doing. She just passed behind me on her way to the kitchen, touched my shoulder gently and said, he was never going to say it. And I said, I know. And I meant it. And it still hurt. I found the key in the desk drawer. It was taped to the underside of the middle panel, beneath an old calendar, yellowed with time. Next to it, a sticky note in Coach's sharp block letters. Basement, player files /storage/ keep locked. I stared at it for a long time. The basement had always been off limits. Not explicitly. But in the way that makes kids hesitate at thresholds. Coach called it my quiet place. Said it was where he kept the good stuff. But no one ever saw what that meant. Not players. Not parents. Not Marie. I walked down slowly. The steps creaked the way they do in houses that were never meant to hold secrets. The light switch was halfway down the staircase. I flicked it. A single bulb flared to life at the bottom, casting long shadows across concrete walls and plastic storage bins. But in the far corner, beneath the hanging cord light, I saw it. Not a closet. Not just shelves. A room. Door cracked. Waiting. I stepped in. And the first thing that hit me wasn't the smell, it was the stillness. Like the air had been holding its breath for years. Inside, the walls were lined with corkboards and wooden cubbies. No dust. No clutter. Just order. A system, like everything else. Each cubby had a name. Black marker on masking tape. Dozens of them. Players I recognized. Some I didn't. Every name had something beneath it. A photo. A stat sheet. A handwritten index card with notes like, smart, but needs sharpening. Too dependent on praise. Responds well to silence. Father in prison. Reinforce eye contact. It was a catalog. Not of performance, but of psychology. I found mine in the third row. Lauren James. Photo from sophomore year. Crew cut. Jersey too big. Face still trying to figure out who it belonged to. Beneath it, 3 cards. One labeled Initial Assessment. One labeled Discipline Plan. One labeled Potential Ceiling. I read the last one first. Ceiling. College starter. Possible coach material if he learns detachment. Susceptible to emotional fatigue. Must be watched carefully during losses. Shows signs of codependent drive. Will break himself for approval. Use carefully. I sat down on the floor, back against the cold wall. Held that card like it was something sharp. Because he was right. And I hated how much that scared me. In the center of the room, there was a table. And on it, a display. Not trophies. Not medals. Objects. A shoelace. A cracked mouthguard. A folded piece of jersey fabric. A broken wristwatch. Each one with a label underneath. Came back after injury. Refused to quit lap. First to arrive, last to leave. Broke. Still finished. It wasn't a trophy room. It was a catalog of survival. A shrine to the moments coach deemed worthy of permanence. Pain, mostly. Effort through suffering. Proof that his methods worked. I stood there a long time, looking at that table, remembering the moments behind the items. Not the victories. The breaks. The costs. That shoelace? It was from a game where a boy dislocated his shoulder but stayed in for 2 more plays. The mouthguard? A kid who cracked a molar during a drill but didn't say anything until practice ended. I remembered that boy. He cried in the locker room. Coach told him, "That's a man's cry. You earned it." And we all clapped. Because we didn't know better. I took my card. Just mine. Left the rest. Slipped it into my pocket and turned off the light. Didn't close the door. Didn't lock it. Just let it be what it was. A place where his version of us still lived. But I wouldn't leave myself there anymore. Back upstairs, Marie was making lunch. She didn't ask where I'd been. But when I sat at the table, she looked at my face and said, "You finally went down, didn't you?" I nodded. "It's all still there," she said softly. Like he thought someone would keep it. I didn't respond. But I thought. Someone did. Me. For too long. Legacy isn't about what we leave behind. It's about what others are willing to carry. And I was done carrying his version of me. It started with silence. The kind you feel in your bones. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of expectation. No drills. No clock. No voice barking behind you telling you to go again, faster this time. Just me. In the den. Coach's house. Now mine, for a few more days, until I locked the door behind me. The weight of everything I'd found still in the walls. And a phone in my hand. I didn't plan to speak. I didn't rehearse it. Didn't even open the voice memos app until my thumb hovered there without thinking. But I knew deep down, something had to be said. Not to him. Not to Marie. Not to a therapist, or a teammate, or some future version of myself who could understand. Just now. To me. I hit record. The red light blinked. The room waited. And I started talking. Okay. So. I don't know what this is, or who I'm talking to. Maybe it's the part of me I left on the field. Or in the garage. Or in that fucking basement downstairs with the name tag on the cubby. But here it is. I don't think I ever hated him. That's what's weird. Not really. Not even after reading what he wrote about me like I was a project he was working on until the screws stopped turning. I think what I felt was worse than hate. I believed him. I believed him when he said pain made me better. When he said crying was fine, but only when no one could see. I believed that silence was strength. That control was love. That if someone stayed up all night writing notes about you, that meant they cared. And maybe it did. But the version of love I learned here. It came with a rulebook I never wrote. And I followed it so well I forgot I had a body that could say no. I paused. The air felt heavier now. But not in a way that asked me to stop. In a way that dared me to keep going. Coach, if you ever listen to this. You won't. I want you to know something. You weren't a monster. You were broken. You were a boy who never got to grieve. Who turned structure into religion and worshipped routine because it didn't leave. And I was the altar you built. I don't know if you ever loved me, but I know you picked me. And for a long time, I thought that was the same thing. You made me tough. I'll give you that. You taught me how to keep going, even when everything in my chest was burning. But you never taught me how to stop. Never taught me how to say, "I'm tired," and not be ashamed. Never showed me how to be soft. Or kind. Or still. I had to learn that part on my own. And it's the part I'm proudest of. There was a long stretch of silence after that. I let the mic record it. Because some silences deserve to be captured. Proof that not speaking can be intentional, not just inherited. Then I whispered, "I'm not your tape anymore. I'm mine. And I'm still recording." I hit stop. Set the phone on the table. Didn't play it back. Didn't need to. It wasn't for critique. Or clarity. Or confirmation. It was for release. That night, I slept with the window cracked. Let the wind move through the room. Didn't dream. Didn't need to. We met at the field. Not the fancy one they built in 15. The old one. The patchy, uneven, half-lit stretch of grass behind the middle school. The one where we ran drills until we puked. Where we won our first game and learned how to lose with our mouths shut. Someone brought a cooler. Someone else brought pizza that was already cold. No one brought a plan. That was the point. There were maybe 10 of us. Guys I hadn't seen in a decade. Kyle Stretch. Mendez. Anthony Roth. Briggs, the quiet one who always hit like a truck. Even Marcus, who'd moved to Denver and hadn't been back since '09. We didn't hug at first. Just nodded. Talked with our shoulders. Grunted our greetings like we were still pretending the words didn't matter. Then we sat. Folding chairs in a messy circle at midfield. The lights were off, but the stars were out. And for a while, we didn't talk about him. We talked about us. Kyle had 2 kids now. Briggs taught high school shop. Marcus was sober. Roth still had the same laugh that made it impossible to stay mad at him. We passed beers. Traded updates. But it didn't stay light for long. Because none of us came here just to catch up. It was Roth who broke the seal. He leaned back in his chair, eyes on the scoreboard, and said, "You ever think we might have turned out fine without him?" Nobody answered right away. Then Kyle exhaled. Nope. More silence. Then Briggs. But maybe we wouldn't have had to spend so much time unlearning his voice. That hit. Hard. I felt it land in the middle of the circle. Like a stone dropped in still water. Marcus sipped his Coke. Then said, "I still wake up thinking I'm late for film review." We all laughed. Because we got it. That hum in your spine that tells you to move before you're even conscious. That programming. I nodded. Sometimes I can't go for a run without hearing him in my head. Kyle added, "Sometimes I need to." And then someone, maybe me, maybe Roth, finally said it. He wasn't always right. Not whispered. Not bitter. Just true. The energy shifted. Not downward. Just deeper. Like we'd all been waiting for permission. To speak freely. To mourn him without myth. We started telling stories. Not the highlight reel ones. The real ones. How Coach once made Kyle run 3 extra miles because his dad showed up drunk to practice. How Marcus dislocated his thumb and Coach told him to strap it or sit. How I once cried in the locker room after a loss and he made me scrub the floor tiles in silence for an hour. Anthony said. He taught me how to push through. I nodded. So did Payne. But no one turned it into blame. We weren't there to tear him down. We were there to hold all of him. The parts that made us better. And the parts that made us small. Briggs said it best. He thought he was building warriors. But we weren't at war. We were just boys who needed someone to stay. And then he paused. Looked around. Added. He stayed. I'll give him that. It got quiet after that. Not awkward. Just full. The kind of quiet that comes when truth has settled and no one needs to poke at it. We sat under the stars. Listening to the field creak beneath us. Letting him rest in memory. Not as a saint. Not as a villain. Just as a man who tried to turn pain into purpose. And sometimes forgot we weren't just parts in a machine. When I left that night, I walked the sideline one last time. Touched the chain-link fence. And thought, this field doesn't belong to him anymore. It belongs to us. To the stories we're finally telling. To the truths we're no longer afraid to say out loud. I left town Monday morning. No ceremony. No one standing in the driveway. No letters tucked under the windshield wiper. Just me. A bag. And the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. Just complete. The house didn't feel like his anymore. Not even haunted. Just empty. And that felt okay. I'd taken what I needed. And what I didn't, I let it stay behind. The basement, the journals, the folded jersey with my number on it tucked into the hall closet. They could belong to time now. I stopped by the diner on the way out. Ordered the same breakfast I used to get after 2-a-days. Eggs. Bacon. Dry toast. The waitress didn't recognize me. That felt right. Back in the truck, I played the voice memo again. The one I'd recorded in the den. It didn't hit the same this time. Not because it wasn't true, but because I wasn't inside it anymore. I was listening as myself. Not as his son, not son. Not as the player who needed a nod. Just a man. In his own body. With his own voice. I got home just before dark. Claire met me at the door. Wrapped her arms around my neck like I hadn't been gone 10 days. She didn't ask how it went. Didn't need to. Just said, "You look taller." I laughed. I think I might be. Later, while we were brushing our teeth, I asked her, "Do you think I'm too hard on myself?" She looked at me in the mirror. Not quick. Not playful. Just honest. "I think you learn to be hard before you learn to be kind." I nodded. "I'm trying to switch that around." She spit, wiped her mouth. "I know. That's why it's working." Emma was already asleep. But I went in anyway. Sat on the edge of her bed. Watched her breathe. And I promised, quietly to myself, that I wouldn't coach her the way I was coached. That I'd correct her without conquering her. That I'd let her fail without folding her into someone else's blueprint. That I'd stay soft. Stay clear. Stay. Before I turned out the light, she stirred. One eye opened. Sleep heavy. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. I smiled. Brushed her hair from her forehead. "Hi, baby. Go back to sleep. You smell like old books," she mumbled. Then rolled over and started snoring. I stood there, hand on the doorframe, and thought, this is the life he wanted me to be ready for. He just didn't know how to make room for it. So I'll make room. Later that week, I started cleaning the garage. Tossed the rusted weights. Sold the bench press. Found my old cleats in a plastic bin, still caked with red clay from that final game. I didn't keep them. Didn't need to. The memory isn't in the laces. It's in the choice I have now. To play by new rules. To write my own scouting report. To be a man who doesn't measure himself by scars. I still hear him sometimes. Not in a haunting way. Just a tone. A word. The whisper of a whistle when I'm being too hard on myself. But now I answer back. Now I say, that's not mine. That voice doesn't get to call plays anymore. This story doesn't end with a phone call. Or a dream. Or a ghost on the bleachers. It ends here. In a quiet house. With the dinner table set. A child laughing in the other room. And no playbook in sight. Just presence. Just breath. Just me. Uncoached. Uncorrected. Unfinished. But fully mine. They say the memory plays tricks on you. That the past gets softer with time, sanded down into something more bearable. But I remember that car like it just drove off yesterday, the blue Chevy Caprice, 78 model, rust crusting around the wheels, paint faded in patches like worn denim. Every Friday, without fail, it sat across from Kennedy Elementary, idling at the edge of the chain-link fence that boxed in our recess yard like we were something fragile or dangerous. I was 5 the first time I saw it. That same year my father left. It's funny what the mind attaches itself to when it's trying to survive something it doesn't understand. That Friday, I was still crying from the week before, when my dad packed a single black duffel bag, kissed my forehead without looking me in the eyes, and told my mom, "I'll be back to get my boy." He didn't say when. Just, "I'll be back." He didn't knock again. Not once. But that Friday, 1 week later, I looked up from the tire swing, and there it was. Blue. Big. The kind of car with muscle in its frame. The kind my father used to talk about when he watched NASCAR and cursed under his breath at Dale Earnhardt. I stood still, staring across the cracked asphalt, past the fence, past the teacher on yard duty who never paid enough attention. And in that car, behind the glare of the windshield, was a shape. A person. I couldn't see his face. But something in me lit up like my insides had remembered how to hope. It wasn't just any blue car. It was his blue car. That night, I told my mom what I saw. She laughed once, short and dry. "You need to stop making up stories, Jamal." "I'm not." It was him. She bent down, took my chin in her hand like she was trying to keep me from drifting too far away. "Baby, your daddy's not coming back. You understand me?" He made his choice. But I didn't understand. Not then. Not for a long time. I watched that car for 10 years. Every Friday. Same place. Same time, just before the last bell. I never told anyone else after that first conversation. It became my secret ritual. I'd press my face to the playground fence and wait. Some weeks, it didn't come, and I'd go home with a lump in my throat and no appetite. Other weeks, I'd see it sitting there before I even stepped outside. Sometimes it idled, exhaust puffing out like little sighs of impatience. Other times, it was parked cold and silent, like it had been there all day, waiting. There was never a license plate I could make out. The sun would hit it at the right angle, or it would be covered in grime. That was part of the mystery, too. Part of the myth I built around him. Around it. I told myself stories. That he had to leave for reasons he couldn't explain. That there were people after him. That he was a spy. Or a cop gone rogue. That he'd made a mistake but never stopped loving me. That he was watching, waiting for the right time to come back. Each story changed depending on the week. But the ending was always the same. One day, the door to the Caprice would open. He'd step out, walk across the street, kneel in front of me with tears in his eyes, and say, "I told you I'd be back." But of course, he never did. After elementary school, the car stopped coming. Or maybe I stopped seeing it. Middle school didn't have recess. There was no fence to stare through, no playground for him to watch. I tried to let go. Told myself it was childish, that real life didn't work like that. But even as I grew, the hope stayed buried under my ribs, like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing on. My mom remarried when I was 15. Mr. Reeves. He was a decent man, quiet, worked nights at the GM plant and always left a 20 on the kitchen counter. Just in case. But he wasn't my father. He never tried to be. I respected that. Still, every time I looked at the front door, I half expected it to swing open and reveal the man in the blue car, holding his old duffel, asking what he missed. Life went on, as it does. I got through high school with decent grades, enough to land a scholarship to Wayne State. Stayed local because Mom didn't want me far. Said she already lost one man to the road. Didn't want to lose another. I didn't correct her. But part of me wanted to say I wasn't staying for her. I was staying for him. Because he might still be here. Because he might be waiting. I studied sociology, mostly because I liked understanding why people did what they did, why they stayed, why they left. It was like trying to decode my own life by studying everyone else's. But the answers never satisfied. After graduation, I did what too many people do when they don't know where to go next. I wandered. Took a string of jobs. A call center. A used furniture store. I even worked as a security guard at one of those 24-hour laundromats off 8 Mile. Everywhere I went, I looked at people's faces, scanning them like they might carry some piece of him. A smile. A gesture. A scar. I never found him. Then, one summer in 2010, I signed up to volunteer at a local youth center near the old neighborhood. Figured it was time to give back, maybe help some kids who felt like I once did, abandoned, confused, stuck waiting on someone who never showed up. It was a Tuesday when I met Isaiah. 9 years old. Thin as a switch. eyes too big for his face, and a chip on his shoulder that could have knocked down a grown man. He reminded me of me. He sat alone during lunch. Drew in a spiral notebook with a pencil so short it looked like a broken toothpick. I asked him what he was sketching. He didn't look up. Cars. What kind? Caprices. I froze. Why those? He shrugged. My dad has one. He comes to watch me sometimes. From his car. Something cold and electric passed through me. What color? He glanced up, suspicious. Blue. Why? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, I dug through my old boxes in the attic. Found the notebooks I used to keep as a kid. Every Friday from 1st to 5th grade, I'd drawn a square with 4 wheels and scribbled something like, "Saw him again today," or "He stayed longer this time." The handwriting got neater over time, but the message never changed. I flipped through those pages for hours. Then I got an idea. The Caprice had to have a record. Something. A paper trail. Parking tickets, maybe? Citations for loitering near a school. It was Detroit in the late 80s, early 90s. There had to be a system, no matter how broken. I didn't sleep. I just started digging. Because I was tired of wondering. Because maybe I'd never stop being that 5-year-old boy staring through a fence, waiting for the man in the blue car to open the door and say, "I told you I'd be back." You ever chase a ghost through paperwork? I did. After hearing Isaiah say those words, "My dad has one. He comes to watch me sometimes." From his car. I couldn't sit still. Something old inside me woke up. Something raw and sharp. I started going through everything I had. Every box. Every notebook. Every memory that hadn't turned to dust. I wanted proof, not just for me anymore, but for Isaiah too. Maybe if I could find his dad, I'd find mine. It started with my old journals. I hadn't looked at them in years. Most of them were in a shoebox under a stack of my mom's high school yearbooks, stained with basement dust and mildew. Each entry was dated. Fridays, always. I'd written things like, "Blue car again. Parked by the tree near the janitor's gate. 3:05 p.m. He didn't leave until the bell rang. Windows tinted. No plates again. Still, it's him. I know it." Those notes were my time machine. My proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. The same time. The same spot. For nearly 10 years. No kid makes that up and sticks with it that long. So I started thinking. If the car was really there that often, someone had to have noticed. A school's security guard, a nosy neighbor, or, if I was lucky, a cop who wrote a citation. Parking violations are public record in Detroit, or at least some of them were, even back then. So I went down to the city clerk's office, hoping they'd have something. The guy at the counter was younger than me, looked like he just stepped out of college and still smelled like ambition. "You got a license plate number?" he asked, already reaching for a form. "No," I said. "That's the thing. I don't. But I have locations. Dates. A card description." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "I'm serious," I said. "Blue Chevy Caprice. Parked outside Kennedy Elementary. Fridays, between 87 and 97. That's a long window, man." "I know. But I just need to know if any blue Caprice got sighted in that area. Please." He sighed, rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache he didn't deserve. "All right," he said. "Let me see what I can do." The clerk came back half an hour later with a printed sheet and a cup of bad coffee he didn't offer to share. "Here," he said, sliding the paper toward me. "It's not everything, but I filtered for vehicle make and area code. Most of the stuff from the 80s and early 90s is spotty, but there's a hit in 1991. February. Unauthorized idling within 500 feet of a school zone. Blue Chevy Caprice. No license on file." My heart thudded like someone had punched it awake. "Do you have the time?" He checked. "Says 2:55 p.m. That was it. That had to be it. The citation had a location, street, and block number. The same block as Kennedy Elementary. That wasn't a coincidence. It was confirmation. I asked for a copy, paid the fee, and left with trembling hands. My fingers gripped that paper like it might float away if I let go. Back at home, I pinned it to my wall next to a childhood drawing of the Caprice. The resemblance was crude, a blue box on wheels, but I saw it. The same presence. The same ache. One parking ticket. One crack in the wall. I was starting to believe again. The next day at the youth center, Isaiah was sitting by himself again, drawing with the same broken pencil. I brought him a fresh set, mechanical ones with extra lead, and sat down beside him. He didn't say thank you, but he took them. You said your dad watches from his car. I began carefully. Does he come every week? He shrugged. Mostly Fridays. Sometimes Wednesdays too. Depends if he's working. I swallowed. He ever talked to you? Once, he said, eyes still on his paper. Gave me a Snickers through the window. Said he was sorry. That word. Sorry. It knocked the air out of me. What kind of car did you say he drives? He glanced at me, narrowed his eyes. Why do you care? Because when I was your age, someone used to watch me too. Same car. He stared at me for a long time. Then nodded once, like he understood more than most kids his age should. Caprices are cool, he said simply. I nodded. Yeah. They are. That night, I pulled out my dad's name, Raymond Delaney, and started cross-referencing with DMV records. I didn't have access to the system directly, so I called in a favor from an old college buddy who worked in the department. Said he'd take a look when he could. Days passed. Then a week. I started to think I was crazy. Like maybe I'd built a life around a mirage. But then the call came. Raymond Delaney, born 62. Owned a 1978 Chevy Caprice Classic. Registered under a P.O. box for a few years. No current registration. Last activity was 1997. Right around the time the car stopped showing up. I asked if there was an address tied to the P.O. box. He hesitated. You sure you want to chase this man? More than anything. He gave it to me. On the edge of Hamtramck. Not too far from the old Polish bakeries. The building was still standing. The next day, I drove out there. The street was quiet, almost too quiet for Detroit. Cracked sidewalks, a busted fire hydrant, and a half-board corner store that used to sell grape now and laters when I was a kid. The address led to a 2-story apartment complex with peeling paint and sagging gutters. The manager let me into the records room for $50 cash and a 6-pack of Faygo Red Pop. I dug through rental agreements. Scanned names. And then there it was. Delaney, Raymond. Unit 2B. 1990 to 1997. My hands shook as I traced the signature at the bottom. I'd seen it once in an old birthday card he sent when I turned 7. Stay strong. I'll be back soon. Love, Dad. This was real. He had been here. He'd stayed close. Lived just 15 minutes from me for 7 years after he left. The questions swarmed me like bees. Why didn't he come home? Why watch from a distance and never knock on the door? What was he running from? And then, the biggest one, was he still alive? I went back to the youth center the next day, but Isaiah wasn't there. His counselor said he'd been pulled out of the program for a few weeks. Family stuff, she said. Not sure what. I asked if she had a last name. Johnson, she said. His mom? Tamika. I froze. That was the name my mom used to curse under her breath when she thought I wasn't listening. That Tamika chick ruined everything. I'd never known what she meant. But now I had to know. I called my mom that night. She was tired. Said she was watching Wheel of Fortune and didn't want to talk long. Ma, I said, did Dad ever know someone named Tamika Johnson? The silence stretched. Then, why are you asking about that man again? Just answer me. Another pause. Yeah. He knew her. She was around. Around how? She worked at the shop with him for a while. Then they got close. Too close. He moved out not long after. Said he needed space. Space, my ass. Did he have a kid with her? My mom exhaled hard. I don't know. I tried not to ask. I didn't want to know. If Isaiah was my brother, if the man in the blue caprice watched both of us, if Raymond Delaney had left 2 sons behind, 2 fences, 2 lives he couldn't bring himself to be a part of. I didn't know if I was about to fall apart or be reborn. But I knew this. I was going to find him. Even if I had to dig through every record in this goddamn city. I didn't sleep after that call with my mom. I just sat in the living room staring at that old journal page again. February 15th, 1991. He came today. Stayed till 3:10. I think he saw me. 10 years old. I'd drawn a crude little heart around the words like it meant something. Maybe it did. Now I was 33 years old, and everything I thought I'd buried was resurfacing. Names, shadows, pieces of a man I never really got to know. And Isaiah, this kid who could have just been another youth center file, he might be my brother. But I couldn't say it out loud. Not yet. There was something sacred about the not knowing. Once you named it, you couldn't unname it. Once you faced the truth, you had to live with it. I needed to see Tamika. I found her 2 days later. Not through Isaiah. I didn't want to spook him, and I sure as hell wasn't going to barge into his life claiming to be something I wasn't sure about yet. I found her through a public records search tied to the old address from the youth center's emergency contact form. She worked at a credit union off Gresham, assistant manager, according to the listing. I drove there on my lunch break. The building was glass and beige brick, tucked between a used car lot and a payday loan place with a flickering neon sign that read, "Cash Instant." I waited until her shift ended, then followed her outside. She looked the same age as my mother. Maybe a little younger. Still had presence, though. Tall, proud shoulders. Wore her hair in box braids, pulled back into a low bun. She didn't see me until I stepped into her path. "Tamika?" She froze, keys clutched tight in her hand like she was about to use them as a weapon. "Sorry," I said quickly, holding up my palms. "I'm not here for trouble. I think you knew my father." She narrowed her eyes. "I don't know who you are. My name's Jamal Delaney." She blinked. Just once. Then she said, "Well, hell." We sat in her car. I didn't push. Just let her talk when she was ready. "I knew he had a son," she said after a long silence. "He talked about you sometimes. Said you had his stubbornness. His eyes." I looked down at my hands. "I thought maybe." I hesitated. "Maybe Isaiah. He might be yours too," she cut in. I nodded slowly. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Wouldn't that be something? Is it possible?" She didn't answer right away. Just looked out the windshield, watching nothing. "We were off and on," she said. "He was never good at staying put. But yeah, it's possible." I felt something in me tilt. Like the floor of the world had shifted half an inch. "Why didn't he ever stay?" I asked. "Why was he always watching but never stepping in?" She turned to me then, and for the first time, her expression softened. "Because Raymond was full of guilt. He never thought he was good enough to be a father. Thought he'd mess y'all up worse if he came back. But he was already gone." "Yeah," she said quietly. "But being gone means you don't have to prove anything. You get to stay perfect in the eyes of a kid. You don't have to disappoint them more than you already did." I swallowed hard. "I hated him for a long time," she added. "But the truth is, he loved his sons. Just didn't know how to show it." "His sons?" She said it like it was already decided. She gave me an address. Said he'd stayed there for a while after the P.O. box dried up. A motel on 7 Mile. Said if he wasn't at work, that's where he'd be. "Work? Used to do repo jobs," she said. Towed cars for a guy named Pete out in Redford. Paid under the table. No paper trail. And now? She looked at me like she wanted to lie. Like she wanted to protect me from something. But she didn't. He died, she said. About 6 years ago. Heart failure. Alone. My breath caught. My chest went tight like something had clamped around it. No service, she added. No obituary. Just gone. I stared at the dashboard. At the dusty vent. At the scratch in the glove box that looked like a scar. He's really gone? I whispered. She nodded. Yeah, baby. He's gone. I didn't cry in her car. Didn't scream or punch the dashboard or slam the door when I left. I just walked back to mine, sat in the driver's seat, and stared out at the sky like maybe he'd float down from it and explain himself. 6 years? That meant he died in 2004. I would have been 27. Still in college. Still hoping, somewhere deep down, that he'd show up to graduation. He never did. He never would. The next day I went back to the motel. It was barely standing. The kind of place you pass without seeing. Paint peeling off the walls. A busted vending machine blinking 12 o'clock. The woman behind the bulletproof glass looked like she'd been chewing the same piece of gum since 1993. I asked if she remembered him. Showed her a photo Tamika had dug up from an old shoebox. Him in a tiger's cap, younger than I ever remembered him being. She studied it. Room 9, she said finally. He used to leave his door open when it was hot. Sat in there smoking and playing old records. Marvin Gaye. Donny Hathaway. Was he friendly? She shrugged. Kept to himself. Always paid on time. Never brought women around. Just stared at that wall like it owed him something. Did he ever talk about his kids? She gave me a look. He ever not talk about his kids? I smiled then. Couldn't help it. A broken, aching kind of smile. What happened when he died? Paramedics found him. Neighbor called about the smell. No one claimed the body. I felt sick. The idea of him lying there, alone, forgotten, while I was out living my life, wondering if he still loved me. Is the room still open? She hesitated. Ain't rented in months. I can give you 10 minutes. Room 9 was more shrine than shelter. Dust coated every surface. The wallpaper had peeled back in long yellow strips. But the smell, cigarettes and old wood, hit me like a punch to the soul. Like stepping into his lungs. There was still a record player in the corner. A stack of LPs. Marvin Gaye's What's Going On sat on top, warped but recognizable. I opened the dresser drawers. Most were empty, but one held a small stack of envelopes. All addressed the same way. To Jamal. Some were dated. Some weren't. Some were never sealed. My hand shook as I picked one up and unfolded it. Jamal. I parked outside your school again today. You wore red. You look tall. Strong. I'm proud of you, even if I don't deserve to be. I wanted to get out. I did. I swear I did. But my feet stayed planted. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew if I came closer you'd see how small I really am. But I see you. Every Friday. I see you. Dad? I didn't read the rest until later. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. I slid to the floor, those letters pressed against my chest, and for the first time since I was 5 years old, I let myself sob. Ugly, open, throat-tearing sobs. He was there. He did care. He was broken, but he hadn't forgotten me. The next week, I sat Isaiah down after lunch. I didn't say I'm your brother. Didn't say our father loved us but didn't know how to stay. I just said, "You want to see something?" He nodded. I pulled out one of the letters. Read it to him slowly, carefully, like it was scripture. When I finished, he asked, "Who wrote that?" "Your dad," I said. "And mine." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "He watched me too. Every Friday." I smiled. I know, I said. I know he did. You'd think closure would feel like a door finally closing. But it doesn't. Not really. Not when that door stays just slightly ajar, whispering with every breeze. Because even with the letters, the motel room, the truth about his death, I didn't feel closure. I felt like I'd stepped into a second childhood, one where the fairy tale was real but still ended in silence. I kept the letters in a shoebox under my bed. Couldn't bring myself to read all of them at once. I treated them like sacred things, slow, careful, unwrapping each one like it might disappear if I touched it wrong. One of them had a drawing inside. A car. Of course. Blue Caprice, sketched in black ink on the back of a Shell gas receipt. Still runs? He wrote beneath it. Just like me. Another had a folded Polaroid tucked between the pages. Me. At the fence. 4th grade, maybe 5th. Faded red hoodie, hands gripping the chain link like I could pull the world closer. It was taken from across the street, his perspective. The angle was slightly crooked, like he'd taken it in a rush. I stared at it for hours. He'd taken pictures of me. He watched. He remembered. He tried. I didn't tell my mom everything. Not at first. She still answered the phone like she was bracing for an argument. Ma, I said, I found him. Silence. I found where he lived. The car. The place. The whole trail. Why? She asked. Not with anger, just exhaustion. Why now? I needed to know if he ever cared. She let out a slow breath. And? He did. She didn't say anything. Not for a long time. Then, quietly, that's harder than if he didn't. Why? Because now you know he stayed close. And he still didn't come home. The next Saturday, I went back to room 9. I brought a duffel bag. Collected the letters, the records, a rusted wrench set in the closet. His smell was fading from the room, but I carried it with me. At the bottom of the closet, under an old towel, I found a shoebox wrapped in plastic. Inside was a small tin, like the kind for cookies or sewing needles. There were keys in it. One labeled Chevy in faded Sharpie. The other blank. I don't know what possessed me, but I called Tamika and asked the question burning at the edge of my brain. Do you know what happened to the Caprice? She sighed. I think it got impounded after he passed. He had it towed once. Couldn't afford the space to keep it near the motel. Might have been left at Pete's lot in Redford. So I drove out there. Pete's place was more scrapyard than storage lot. It sat behind a shuttered auto body shop, surrounded by a fence made of welded car doors and broken grills. A single dog barked behind a metal gate as I pulled up. An old man appeared from the shop, wiping grease off his hands with a rag that looked dirtier than his coveralls. You Pete? I asked. Depends. You buying or asking favors? I smiled. Bit of both. I explained who I was and who I was looking for. When I said, Raymond Delaney, the man's face went still. Ray, he said like he hadn't heard the name in years. Towed for me back in the 90s. Good guy. Quiet. Always paid his debts. Did he leave a car here? Pete scratched his beard. Might have. We got a couple in the back been sitting forever. You say Caprice? Blue. 78, no plates. He nodded. Follow me. It was still there. Covered in a plastic tarp, mold climbing the sides, tires flat to the rims. But it was there. The car from my memories. The car from my dreams. My mythology made metal. Been sitting 20 years, Pete said. Ray stopped coming around. Figured he was dead. I walked to it like it might vanish if I moved too fast. Ran my hand across the hood. Flakes of paint came off in my fingers. Rust bloomed along the edges like dried blood. But beneath it all, it was still his. I pulled out the labeled key from my pocket. Slid it into the driver's door. It clicked open with a sound that felt like thunder in my ears. The inside was dust and decay. The driver's seat was worn through, foam poking out like old bones. An air freshener hung from the rearview mirror, cherry-scented, long dead. The glove compartment creaked open with a stiff groan. Inside were receipts, more photos, a pocket-sized Bible, and one cassette tape in a cracked plastic case labeled, "For Jamal." Pete gave me a day to decide what I wanted to do. "If you want it," he said, "you'll need a trailer. Tow truck won't touch that without payment." "I'll figure it out," I said. And I did. Called in favors. Used a chunk of savings I shouldn't have touched. Got it towed to a friend's garage who owed me 2 months of help from a move years back. I told him I wanted to restore it. He looked at me like I was insane. But he agreed. That night I sat in my apartment, alone, with the tape in my hands. I didn't have a working cassette player. Hadn't in years. So I borrowed one from the youth center storage closet, an old boombox used for dance nights that hadn't worked in a decade. But it still played tapes. I sat in my room, tape in hand, knees bouncing like a drumbeat. Then I pushed it in. Press play. And his voice filled the room. "Hey, Jamal. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. Or at least, it means you found what I couldn't give you when I was alive. I ain't good at words. You probably know that already. Most of what I wanted to say, I never got the chance to. I saw you, though. Every week. I saw you become a man. I saw the way you waited. And I couldn't cross that street. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't love myself. You needed a father. I only knew how to be a shadow. But I want you to know, I never stopped caring. Not for a day. I was there when you got your first bike. I was parked outside when you went to prom. I left a note under your mom's mat once. You never found it. That's okay. You were always the best thing I ever had a part in making. I'm sorry, son. For all of it. If you can forgive me, even a little, maybe that means there's still something good in me. Take the car. Fix it if you want. Let it be yours. Just don't be like me. Don't watch life from across the street. Love you always. Dad. I sat in the dark for an hour after it ended. Not moving. Not speaking. Just listening to the quiet where his voice had been. It was like he'd been reaching out across time, pulling me into something whole. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting. I was seen. At the youth center, Isaiah waited for me the next morning. He didn't ask why my eyes were red. He just said, "I started drawing you a car." I smiled. "Blue?" He nodded. "Like his." We sat side by side. Two sons of a shadow. And this time, we weren't watching the world from behind a fence. We were stepping into it. Together. They towed the Caprice into Devon's garage on a humid Tuesday afternoon, and when the rusted beast came to a stop, it felt like an old king being lowered back onto his throne. Devon leaned against the lift post with a toothpick in his mouth, staring at the car like it had crawled out of a junkyard horror film. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. I nodded. "It's not just a car." He didn't press further. Just walked around the frame and muttered, "She's gonna need a miracle." So that's what we started building, one miracle, one bolt at a time. The engine was half dead, but the bones were solid. The frame had held. Rust had eaten into the wheel wells and the lower rocker panels, but nothing we couldn't grind back. We stripped it piece by piece, hood, doors, seats. Everything came off like dead skin, revealing the story beneath. I'd never worked on a car before. Not like this. My dad had tools, I remembered that. A set he kept lined up in a red Craftsman box like sacred artifacts. When I was little, I'd sneak into the shed and run my fingers across the handles, pretending I knew what each one did. Now I was holding those same tools. Same red box. Tamika had kept it all these years, tucked in her garage beneath a tarp and some old folding chairs. Said she couldn't bring herself to throw it out. "You should have it," she told me. "Maybe it was always supposed to end up with you." The weight of each wrench felt like memory. Like apology. Every evening, I left my day job at the downtown call center and drove straight to the garage. Devin gave me keys and full access, said it was good to see someone give a damn about something. I sanded rust until my fingers blistered, replaced spark plugs and belts, scrubbed oil out of the transmission pan while old Motown tracks played through the garage radio, crackling with static like ghost voices. Sometimes I'd pause when one of my father's favorite songs came on, Someday We'll All Be Free, or Inner City Blues, and just sit there, greasy hands in my lap, feeling something rise in my throat I didn't have the words for. It was like I was rebuilding him, too. Piece by piece. Isaiah started coming around after school. Just watching at first, then handing me tools. He was curious, quick learner, quiet like me. One night, I caught him tracing the car's emblem on a notepad. You know what that is? I asked. He nodded. Caprice. Classic. I smiled. You remember more than I thought. I remember the smell, he said. Cherry and smoke. He always had that in his clothes. That hit harder than I expected. I'd remembered it too. We replaced the interior slowly, found parts online, junked others from old Chevys rotting in forgotten corners of East Side yards. Some nights we'd spend hours pulling apart old dashboards, searching for screws that hadn't rusted through. It was like a treasure hunt in a graveyard. There were nights I didn't want to go home. Nights I sat in the front seat of that stripped Caprice and read another letter from the shoebox, turning the cassette tape over in my hand like a relic. I played it less now. Didn't need to hear the words to feel them anymore. But I hadn't played it for Isaiah. Not yet. It was a Sunday morning, 3 months into the restoration, when I finally asked my mom to come see the car. She hesitated at first. Said she didn't need reminders. Said she'd buried him a long time ago. But then she showed up, floral scarf tied around her hair, eyes already full of storm clouds. She walked around the Caprice without touching it. You remember this? I asked. She nodded once. He parked across the street. Every Friday. I know, she said quietly. That stopped me cold. You knew? She sighed. Of course I knew. I saw it too. But I had to protect you. If I'd said it was him, you'd have gone chasing. You would have waited forever. I did wait forever. She looked at me then, eyes tired. I know. And we didn't speak after that. She just sat inside it for a while, fingers on the dash, and cried so quietly I barely heard her. The next week, Isaiah asked me, What happens when it's done? What do you mean? The car. When it's finished. I didn't have an answer. Because it wasn't just about getting it running. It was about becoming something. Forgiving something. Maybe even driving forward. But I said, We take a ride. He smiled. Where to? Anywhere you want. The test fire came on a Wednesday. Devin helped me prime the fuel lines, install the new battery, double-check the wiring. We crossed our fingers and turned the key. The Caprice choked once. Twice. Then rumbled to life like it had been waiting all these years just to breathe again. The whole garage shook with it. Devin laughed and slapped the hood. She lives. I stepped back, heart pounding, ears ringing from the low growl of the engine. It wasn't perfect. It rattled a little. But it was alive. It was his voice, roaring through metal and time. I let Isaiah ride shotgun on the first trip. We didn't go far, just circled the block a few times, the streets of our city passing like old photographs out the windows. He rolled the window down. Let the wind catch his curls. It smells like him again, he said. I nodded. Yeah. It does. We passed Kennedy Elementary. The playground had new swings, new fences. But I still saw the ghosts. I still saw me, pressed against the chain link, waiting. I wondered if Isaiah saw himself too. We pulled to the curb across the street and parked. Just like he used to. And we sat there in silence. Watched the schoolyard. Waited for nothing. That night, I gave Isaiah the cassette. Play it when you're ready, I said. He looked at me. Was it for me too? I thought about that. Thought about the way my father said sons in some of the letters. The way he'd left photos of Isaiah too. The way his guilt didn't discriminate between us. Yeah, I said. It was. A week later, Isaiah brought me something, a drawing. The Caprice, detailed and perfect. Parked under a street lamp. 2 shadows inside. One large. One small. He handed it to me and said, "You would have wanted us to ride together." I nodded. "We will. We're planning a trip now. Out past the edge of Detroit. Up through the highways he used to drive, the ones I always imagined him disappearing into. Not to run away this time. But to return. To trace the road back not to him, but forward to who we are because of him. To let the blue Caprice ride again. To let him ride with us. We left before sunrise. I wanted the roads empty. I wanted the silence. Just me, Isaiah, the hum of tires, and the sound of the old engine clearing its throat like it had something to say. The Caprice wasn't smooth, not yet. She rattled at high speeds, grunted on the hills, and one of the side mirrors still vibrated when we hit 50. But she was ours now. Ours in a way he never managed to be. Isaiah sat in the passenger seat, earbuds in, hood up, staring out at the fields that swallowed the freeway. We hadn't told Tamika exactly where we were going, just that we were taking the car for a drive. She looked at me for a long time and said, "Don't get lost out there." I wasn't sure if she meant literally or not. We headed west. Toward Grand Rapids first, then maybe up toward the lake. I didn't have a map, didn't need one. All I wanted was to keep moving. Like maybe I'd outrun something if I drove fast enough. Or maybe I'd catch up to something I missed. The letters still sat in the glove box. So did the cassette. But I didn't play it. Not yet. We stopped in Lansing around noon. Pulled off at a gas station near a church with boarded windows and a playground overtaken by weeds. It reminded me of Detroit in the 90s, so many places left behind. I sat on the curb while Isaiah bought a soda inside. The sun was high. The air smelled like hot rubber and spilled diesel. A man walked by and gave the Caprice a long, low whistle. "That's a 78, ain't it?" "Yeah." "She yours?" I nodded. He smiled like he'd just seen an old friend. "Used to drive one just like it. Took my girl to prom in it. We got married in that car." I smiled politely, but something twisted in me. That car was someone else's wedding memory. For me, it was a question mark with an engine. "You fix her up?" "Piece by piece." He nodded like that meant something more than I understood. "Glad to see one still on the road. Most of them just rust away." Yeah, I thought. Most of them do. That night we pulled into a small lakeside town. I don't even remember the name. Somewhere between South Haven and the horizon. A place with one diner, one gas pump, and a single-story motel painted mint green like a half-forgotten dream. Isaiah wanted to sleep in the car. I didn't blame him. There was something safe about it now. Something sacred. We took turns in the front seat, him drawing by the glow of the dome light, me listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The lake wind carried in the scent of pine and silence. He asked me a question around midnight. "Do you think he would have liked us?" I blinked. "Liked us?" "Yeah," he said. "As people. Not just as his kids." I looked at him, his narrow face, his watchful eyes, the way he carried himself like he was already older than he should have had to be. "I think he loved us," I said. "But liking someone, that takes presence. Time. Effort. I think he was scared of all that." "Why?" "Because loving someone from a distance is easier. You can imagine the best version of them. You never have to deal with their mess." Isaiah nodded slowly, like he already knew. "Do you like me?" he asked. That hit harder than it should have. "Yeah," I said. "A lot." He leaned his head against the window. "I like you too." We found a mechanic the next morning just outside of Holland who helped us change the oil and patch a slow leak in the rear left tire. He didn't ask for much, just a handshake and a story. So I told him we were driving the car our dad left behind. He nodded like he'd heard versions of that before. Fathers, he said, either leave too early or stay too long. I didn't know which one ours had done. Maybe both. We stopped by the lake. Isaiah skipped stones across the surface while I sat on a bench, the cassette player balanced on my knees. I still hadn't played it for him. You ready? I asked. He looked at me. Do I need to be? No. But I think it's time. I pressed play. His voice filled the space between us again. That same hesitant rasp. The unpolished sorrow in every syllable. Isaiah sat beside me, hands in his lap, silent. He didn't move. Didn't speak when the tape ended. Just wiped his nose with the sleeve of his hoodie and said, he sounded tired. Yeah, I said. He was. We didn't rewind it. We didn't need to hear it again. It was enough to know the words had been meant for us. The ride back was quieter. The sky turned orange over the farmland, and the Caprice cast a long shadow on the road ahead. We stopped once more, outside a shuttered movie theater with a cracked marquee. I took a picture of the car in front of it, Isaiah standing beside the open door like he owned it. Later, he drew the scene from memory. He gave it to me without a word. I don't know what I expected from the trip. I didn't think it would fix the years or fill the hollow space his absence left. But it didn't need to. The ride wasn't about repair, it was about recognition. About acknowledging that we came from someone broken and still chose to build something whole. I dropped Isaiah off at Tamika's that evening. He didn't get out right away. You think he would have come back if he lived longer? I thought about that. About the motel. The tape. The picture from the fence. Maybe, I said. But I don't think we were supposed to wait forever. Isaiah nodded, pushed open the door. Then, before stepping out, he turned back and said, next time, we should go farther. I smiled. Yeah. We should. I parked the Caprice in my mom's driveway that night. She came out in her slippers, robe pulled tight, and stared at the car like it was a ghost with headlights. I never thought I'd see it again, she said. I didn't think I'd find it. She walked up to it, ran her hand along the roof. Then she looked at me. I'm proud of you, she said. Not because of the car. But because you made something from nothing. It wasn't nothing, I said. He left a lot behind. She smiled, soft and sad. Yeah, she whispered. He did. Later that night, I sat in the car alone. One hand on the wheel. One foot hovering over the brake. Thinking about the years I'd spent staring at that blue silhouette from a playground. Thinking about what I'd wanted him to be. And finally understanding what he was. Not a villain. Not a hero. Just a man who loved quietly, and lost loudly. A man who couldn't come home, but never really left either. I reached into the glove box and pulled out one more letter. Unfolded it. Read it again. And then I started writing one of my own. I wrote the first letter on the back of a diner receipt. Didn't plan it. Didn't think about it. Just sat in the Caprice one night after work, engine cooling beneath me, and the words started bleeding out. Like a bruise finally pressing through the skin. Hey Dad. You probably already know, but I found the car. I found the letters. The tape. I found the motel room you died in. Smelled like mold and cheap smoke. I stayed there longer than I should have. Just staring at the bed, trying to picture you in it. Couldn't. You always felt more real when you weren't in the room. That's the part one can't shake. You were more myth than man. More presence than person. The kind of story people whisper but never touch. But I touched you now. Through your tools. Your words. The car you left behind like a breadcrumb trail for a kid who never stopped wondering. And Dad, if I'm being honest, I'm still angry. I know you loved me. But love without action? That's like headlights on an empty road. You see everything but never reach it. I forgive you anyway. Not because you earned it. But because I need to. Because I want to sleep without asking the ceiling if I was ever enough to come back for. Jamal. That letter stayed folded in my wallet for weeks. I didn't show it to anyone. Not even Isaiah. I didn't write it for answers. I wrote it to release something. But the thing about grief is, it doesn't stay gone. It comes back in new shapes. In Isaiah's drawings. In old photographs I found stuffed in my mother's junk drawer. In the way I caught myself talking to the car some nights, whispering like maybe he was still listening through the dashboard. There was one photo that changed something in me. I found it at the bottom of a torn envelope, buried under registration slips and old receipts. A Polaroid. From the motel, I think. Not of me. Not of Isaiah. Of him. He was sitting on the hood of the Caprice. Cigarette between his fingers. Face turned away from the camera. You couldn't see his eyes, just his jaw, his shoulders, the tired set of his mouth. There was something worn about him. Not in a weak way. But like life had been using him for sandpaper. He looked like a man trying not to disappear. I carried that photo in the glove box after that. Sometimes I took it out and set it on the dash while I drove, like he was riding with me. Like he finally crossed the street and climbed in beside me. One Saturday morning, Isaiah knocked on my door. Unannounced. He was holding a folder. Mom said I should ask you first, he said, stepping inside. What's that? He handed it to me. Inside, school records. A birth certificate. And a letter from Tamika, handwritten, folded twice. I looked at Isaiah. She says it's official, he said. You're my brother. I knew it before I opened anything. Knew it in the silence between us. In the way his voice dropped when he talked about our dad. In the way we both looked at that Caprice like it was a coffin and a church. I smiled. And for the first time in my life, I said the words out loud. I have a brother. Isaiah just nodded like he'd always known. We started spending weekends in the garage again, not fixing the car, just being with it. He'd sketch. I'd polish chrome or rewire the stereo. Devin let us keep using the space, said it gave the shop a heartbeat. One night, Isaiah climbed into the back seat and asked, Did he ever take you anywhere? I laughed. No. I spent my whole life watching him watch me. Isaiah nodded. Same. And then he said something I still think about. You think he wanted us to stay stuck? Like, to live inside the mystery? I shook my head. I think he wanted us to move. Even if he couldn't. So we did. We started driving further every weekend. Not aimlessly, deliberately. Old places. Memory markers. We went to the old GM plant where he used to work. It was mostly rubble now, rebar poking out like broken fingers. We parked across the street and sat in silence. He probably stood right there, I said, pointing to a patch of concrete stained with oil. Waiting for the bus. Thinking about us. Isaiah pulled out a sketch pad. Started drawing him. Not from memory, he didn't have any. But from feeling. When he turned it to show me, I had to blink a few times to stay composed. It looked like the photo. Him on the hood. Looking away. Still caught between leaving and staying. Another weekend, we drove to the lake again. Isaiah brought a new tape. Not music, just static and wind. Said he recorded it with a mic out his window because the car sounded like it was talking. He played it back for me. And it did. The Caprice growled and groaned like a tired animal learning how to breathe again. I started to believe maybe he was in the car. That he lived in its frame. In the static. In the wind pushing against our windshield. I wrote more letters. Never mailed them. Left them in the glove box beside his. I didn't write to him anymore. I wrote with him. Like we were having a conversation through time. Isaiah started writing his own. He didn't let me read them. Said some things were meant to stay between boys and ghosts. I understood. One night, we pulled up to the fence line of Kennedy Elementary. The playground was quiet. Lights flickering across the blacktop. And I saw it. Us. 2 boys. Separated by 20 years. One gripping a chain-link fence. The other sitting in a blue Caprice, Windows rolled halfway down, heart punching against the ribs. I turned to Isaiah. I think we can let it go now. He nodded. You mean the pain? No, I said. The waiting. So we got out. Walked across the street. Stood on the school side of the fence. Looked back at the car. Then turned our backs on it. Just for a minute. And smiled. The blue Caprice stayed in my mother's driveway for almost a year after that. Covered in a gray tarp, the kind that flapped in the wind and made neighbors whisper about dead projects and sons who couldn't let go. I didn't care. Every Saturday, Isaiah and I pulled it off like unveiling a monument. We didn't drive it every time. Some days we just sat inside. Talked. Or didn't. Sometimes the engine wouldn't turn over. Sometimes the brakes stuck. Sometimes the air smelled like him again, cherry and cigarette and something older, heavier, like regret soaked into leather. But it was ours. His. Ours. And for the first time in either of our lives, it was enough. I started writing more. Not just letters to Dad. Stories. Short ones. A boy waits by a fence for someone who never comes, until one day, he walks away and finds someone else waiting for him. Another about two brothers fixing a car that refuses to die, because some machines carry spirits, and some spirits don't know how to leave. I shared the second one with Isaiah. He read it twice and said, I think it's more real than pretend. I told him. So was he. Even if it didn't feel like it. One day, while digging through the last of the motel things, I found something I'd missed before. A note. Not addressed. Not dated. Folded into a paperback copy of Invisible Man. Inside it said, if they ever meet each other, maybe they'll understand why I couldn't be both at once. No name. But I knew it was about us. Jamal and Isaiah. Two boys. Two lives. One father who could never figure out how to be two things at the same time. I showed Isaiah. He didn't say anything. But later that night, he asked if he could sleep in the Caprice. Said the back seat felt more like his room than his actual room did. He started calling me bro around then. Not in a slangy way. In a family way. Like it was a small prayer said through the teeth. We didn't make a big deal out of it. Didn't hug or cry or do anything they'd put in a movie. But he started writing. From Isaiah Johnson Delaney. On his drawings. Said it helped him feel put together. That's when I knew the car wasn't just helping me heal. It was helping him form. By late spring, the Caprice was running smoother than ever. We took it out past 8 Mile one weekend. Just driving aimless again, music low, windows down, air full of old stories and exhaust. We passed a block where a kid was riding his bike alone. Red backpack. Wobbly handlebars. Isaiah watched him for a long time through the side mirror. Then he said, we should start something. Like what? I don't know. A club. Or a garage. For kids who don't have dads. A place where they can build stuff. Like we did. I looked at him. At the 13-year-old with a trauma-colored blueprint for hope. And I thought, he's already more of a man than our father ever figured out how to be. We called it Friday Boys. At first, it was just us. Then a couple kids from the youth center. Then some from Isaiah's school. Devin gave us space behind his shop, an old storage bay we cleared out, scrubbed down, and painted with Isaiah's drawings. We hung tools on pegboards. Set up a bench. Brought in parts from junkyards. We didn't promise to fix their lives. Just gave them something to fix. A rusted muffler. A busted carburetor. A bent license plate that said Love 81 with the E barely hanging on. I nailed it to the wall like a trophy. Isaiah laughed and said, that plate's more honest than most people. We started writing letters together. To the kids. To ourselves. To the fathers who weren't coming. Some of the boys burned theirs after writing them. Others tucked them under seat cushions, or hid them in glove boxes of the busted cars we brought in. It became a ritual. Write. Let go. Build. Right. Let go. Build. Sometimes I sat in the Caprice late at night, reading one of their letters and thinking about how none of us were really broken. We were just unfinished. One Friday, Isaiah handed me a sealed envelope. You don't have to read it, he said. But I want you to have it. I waited until he left. Opened it slow. Inside. Dear Jamal. Thank you for finishing the story he started. Thank you for being there when he couldn't. I think he would have liked watching us from the other side of the fence. Love. Your little brother. I cried again. Not like before. This wasn't grief. This was gratitude with a heartbeat. We hosted an open garage night that summer. Let the neighborhood in. Kids showing off what they'd built. Moms dropping off lemonade. Old men talking about the good old days, like they were trying to convince themselves they existed. Isaiah gave a little speech. Said, "This place is for anyone who ever watched someone leave." And no one clapped. They just stood still. Listening. Like the air had turned into something holy. Later that night, I sat in the Caprice again. Hand on the wheel. Thinking about fences. Thinking about how they keep things out, and keep things in. And how maybe, all this time, I wasn't trying to cross the street to reach him. Maybe I was waiting for someone to walk up beside me. Someone like Isaiah. Someone who knew. There's this moment during restoration, not just cars, but anything broken, where it stops feeling like repair and starts becoming memory. Like you're not fixing it anymore, you're preserving the ghost of something sacred. That's what the Caprice had become by that autumn. A monument. A story we could sit inside. I started calling it the archive. Isaiah just called it Dad. We kept the Friday boys going. What started as 2 brothers turned into 12 kids over 6 months. Some angry. Some quiet. Some like Isaiah, watching everything, drawing when they couldn't speak. We gave them old parts, beat-up frames, busted lawnmowers just to take apart and figure out. It wasn't therapy. But it was healing. Not all of them stayed. One boy named Rayvon stopped coming after his mom's boyfriend moved in. Another, Marcus, came just twice, then left a note on the workbench that just said, "Not ready." We kept his note. Taped it to the wall. Not ready didn't mean broken. It just meant next time. I started drawing again too. Not cars. People. My father, mostly. What I remembered, what I imagined. Isaiah helped me fill in the blanks. The slope of his nose. The way he squinted in sunlight. We recreated him the only way we could, together. Tamika came by once. Walked through the garage, ran her hand across the Caprice's roof, and smiled like it hurt. He used to call this car his church, she said. Didn't know how to pray, but he knew how to drive. I told her he still didn't know how to park. She laughed. And then cried. And then asked if she could sit inside. That same week, Isaiah turned 14. We didn't throw a party. Didn't bake a cake. Instead, we drove. Up 75, past Flint, into the woods along Iosco County. Just the 2 of us, a bag of gas station snacks, and the Caprice humming like it remembered the road better than we did. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Somewhere without fences." He looked out the window. "That's most of the world." "Not where we come from," I said. We pulled off the highway onto a dirt road that led to a clearing. An old campground my dad once mentioned in a letter. Said he used to hide there as a teenager when life got too loud. There was nothing left now but pine trees and silence. Isaiah got out, stretched his arms to the sky, and said, "This is what it feels like to breathe." I just nodded. Because he was right. We built a small fire and sat on opposite logs. No music. No letters. Just space. He broke the silence first. "You think we'll ever forget him?" "No," I said. "But maybe one day we'll stop needing to remember him to feel whole." He looked down at his shoes. "I think I already have." That hit different. Not in a sad way. In a grown-up way. Like watching someone put their own pieces back together. He gave me a drawing before we left. The Caprice again, but this time, it wasn't parked or idling. It was mid-turn, tires lifting, motion lines around the wheels, dirt flying up behind it. And in the driver's seat? Me. No one in the passenger side. No one watching from a distance. Just me. Driving. Owning the road. I held the drawing like scripture. Later that month, I was offered a job out of state. Nonprofit director in Indianapolis, youth engagement, car rehab programs, mentorship expansion. Everything I'd built here, scaled bigger. I didn't answer right away. I drove instead. Back to the old motel. Room 9 had been gutted since the last time. New paint. New carpet. Nothing left of him. Still, I stood in the doorway for a long time, just listening. To what, I don't know. Maybe the silence. Maybe the past. I dropped one last letter under the threshold. Didn't read it. Didn't sign it. Just left it there like a stone on a grave. When I told Isaiah about the job, he didn't flinch. You gonna take it? I don't know. You should, he said. It's what you're supposed to do. What about you? He shrugged. I'll still be here. So will the Caprice. You think you'll miss me? I think I already do. That hurt more than I let on. But I smiled anyway. Because watching him grow was the closest thing to redemption I'd ever known. On my last night before the decision, we sat in the car one more time. Just the two of us. No music. No tools. No talk. He handed me a folded paper before we stepped out. Inside was a new drawing. Same car. This time, both seats were empty. The doors were open. And a small sign on the road read, "This way." I looked at him. He just said, "Go." The next morning, I called the nonprofit. Accepted the offer. Packed what little I needed. And before I left, I handed Isaiah the keys to the Caprice. He blinked like I'd given him a map to his own heart. "I'll keep her running," he said. "I know you will." We didn't hug. We weren't built for that. But we stood side by side in the driveway, looking at the car. Then he said, "You think he'd be proud?" I answered without thinking. "I think he is." I moved to Indianapolis in the fall of 2010. The streets were cleaner, quieter. Fewer broken windows, fewer ghosts. But part of me missed Detroit's noise, its cracks, its pulse. Missed the way home never tried to be something it wasn't. The job kept me busy, meetings, grant writing, mentorship training, interviews. I spent my days trying to build what I'd found in that garage with Isaiah into something replicable. Something real. The first Friday after I moved, I stood outside our new youth center as the school across the street let out. Kids poured out through the chain-link gate, yelling and laughing and tossing backpacks like they didn't weigh anything. I watched from the sidewalk. And just for a second, I saw him. Not my father. Me. 10 years old. Back pressed to the fence. Waiting for someone to care enough to cross the street. I smiled and turned away. Isaiah called every week. Didn't always talk long. But he always had something new. Put a new coat of primer on her. Devin let me teach a younger kid how to strip a carburetor. Drew a new version of the hood ornament. Looks like wings now. Each call felt like a breath from the Caprice itself. Like the old metal was still in motion, still carrying us. And even from hundreds of miles away, I could feel her wheels turning under both our feet. One day, months after the move, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single drawing. A driveway. A house. A boy standing by a fence. And across the street? The blue Caprice. No one inside. Just an open door. And beneath it, Isaiah's scrawl. He made it across. I hung it in my office. Right above my desk. Every kid who sat across from me noticed it. Some asked what it meant. Some didn't. The ones who did? They usually stayed. They usually came back. In the spring, I went back to Detroit for a weekend. Devin invited me to speak at a community event for youth mentorship. I said yes, but really, I just wanted to see Isaiah. The garage looked different. Brighter. Painted blue and gray. Chrome details polished to a mirror sheen. Tools lined up like soldiers. Kids everywhere, laughing, arguing about socket sizes, blasting old-school hip-hop over cheap speakers. And there she was. The Caprice. Shining in the sunlight like she'd never been broken. New tires. Fresh coat. Windows clear as glass. I walked up and ran my hand along the hood. Feels like she remembers me, I said. She never forgot, Isaiah said behind me. He was taller now. Voice deeper. Still had the same eyes though, like he could see the whole world but only trusted a piece of it. He gave me a hug this time. Said nothing. Just held on for a second longer than boys are supposed to. We spent that night driving. Not far. Just around. Past the old school. The motel. The lot where the Caprice had been abandoned. He drove. One hand on the wheel, the other resting out the window like it had always belonged there. You ever talk to him? I asked. Sometimes, he said. Usually when I'm working. Or right before I sleep. Me too. He paused. Then, I don't think I need him to answer anymore. I nodded. Because I knew what he meant. That night, we parked at Belle Isle and watched the city lights blink against the river. Neither of us said much. The Caprice ticked beside us, cooling like a living thing catching its breath. Then Isaiah reached into the glove box and pulled out a bundle of letters. New ones, he said. From the boys. They write after each project. Before they leave. He handed them to me. I didn't read them all. Just one. It said, Dear whoever comes next. I used to think people left because of me. Like I broke something I didn't know how to fix. But here, I built a whole bike with my own hands. It runs. That means maybe I still can too. Thank you. Tyrell, age 12. When we got back to the garage, Isaiah pulled something from the back seat. A license plate. Freshly painted. Blue with white script. W8ING. I laughed. He didn't. I think we should hang it, he said. Let people know where it started. So we did. Right above the garage door. Framed. Lit with a single bulb that flickered sometimes. Didn't matter. The message still burned. I left Detroit again the next morning. But I didn't feel like I was leaving. Because the waiting was over. The silence had been filled. Not with noise. With presence. With people. With motion. Sometimes, I still hear the Caprice in my dreams. Engine low. Wheels humming. And always, that door swinging open. Like he's just stepped out. Finally crossing the street. Finally saying the thing I waited my whole life to hear. I was watching. I was scared. But I never stopped loving you. We don't need fences anymore. Not me. Not Isaiah. Not the boys we keep teaching how to build and unbuild and build again. Because the truth is, we are all just blue cars. Waiting to be driven. Waiting to be claimed. Waiting to be seen.